Chapter 212. Nothing was more lamentable than lying to oneself and others. With Murong Wanru keeping Grand Concubine Yi in check, she probably wouldn't dare cause trouble in the future. She'd even gotten information about the survivors. Long Fei Yi should be satisfied with these two explanations, right? Han Yunxi didn't ask any more questions, but shot Murong Wanru a cold look. Mu Fei, you should stay alone with Wanru. She'll wake up for the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. After that, she'll never wake up again. If you have anything to say it quickly. At these words, Grand Concubine Yi sucked in a cold breath and almost stopped breathing. She'd already accepted the fact that Wanru would never wake up, but now she was suddenly told such a thing. For a moment, she was flustered and didn't know what to do. She'll wake up soon. It'll only take the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. The time it takes to burn a stick of incense. Grand Concubine Yi muttered to herself. Was this a surprise, or a delight? Han Yunxi didn't explain much, but locked the door after leaving the room. She didn't leave, but sat by the door to wait in silence. At this moment, Long Fei Yi walked out of the darkness. Han Yunxi was about to rise when Long Fei Yi motioned for her to sit down. He didn't ask anything, but sat down by her side. That mama was called. Before Han Yunxi could finish, Long Fei Yi cut her off. Millimeter, I've already sent people to investigate. All right, she should have guessed that this guy would keep an eye on everything in the room. Judging from his reaction, he should be satisfied with her results. Soon enough, there was movement from inside the room. Murong Wanru had woken up. It wasn't clear what Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru had said, but their voices were low at first. Suddenly, Murong Wanru began to scream. Why? I hate you. Mu Fei, I'll hate you for the rest of my life. I'm a princess. I'm the most honorable princess. Why can't you give me a proper title? Why can I only be an adopted daughter? Mu Fei, I'll never forgive you. You're the one who took everything from me. I can't accept this. I want a proper title. I'm going to explain everything to His Majesty. I'm the rightful heir of the imperial family. I'm the rightful heir. Mother, you've ruined my life. My life shouldn't be like this. I don't want to. No. It wasn't clear what Grand Concubine Yi felt when she heard the shrieks and curses, but it had to be unbearable. Right now, it wasn't Grand Concubine Yi who felt the worst, but Murong Wanru. She was right. Her life was not supposed to be like this. What she cared about the most in her life was her humble background. Who knew that the truth was like this? Even though she knew the truth, there was nothing she could do about it. As the screams continued, Han Yunxi rose to leave. She didn't want to hear any more. She knew that her actions were far crueler than killing Murong Wanru and Grand Concubine Yi, but Murong Wanru deserved this fate. She wouldn't feel bad about it. Long Fei Yi looked at Han Yunxi's receding figure, and a satisfied smile appeared on his lips. Valued friendship. Han Yunxi, you're ruthless enough, but your lordship wants a ruthless heart like this. Naturally, Marquis Pingbei's estate, the Duke's estate, and the official of the Ministry of Appointments had no interest in the spring hunt. They'd rushed back overnight to wait in the guest hall. Everyone was concerned about Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru's condition, especially Marquis Pingbei and his wife. They were like ants on a hot pan, afraid that something might happen to the two women. This was a high branch they'd worked so hard to climb. If it broke, they'd fall to an unsightly state. Unfortunately, no one from the Duke of Qin's estate received them, so they couldn't find anyone to ask. After waiting for 2 hours, the old Duke and the official of the Ministry of Appointments left first. Marquis Pingbei's family of 3 could only keep waiting. After Murong Wanru fell into a coma, Long Fei Yi found Imperial Physician Li, who couldn't figure out the cause of her illness. In the end, he could only say that she'd been frightened too much and hit her head. As for when she'd wake up, he wasn't sure. Grand Concubine Yi, who had a clear idea of the situation, leaned on one side with a grief-stricken face. Her tears were still wet, but she didn't ask a single question. If she didn't pursue the matter further, who else would pursue the matter further? As a result, the plot ended with Grand Concubine Yi bedridden with serious injuries and Murong Wanru unconscious. All of the blame fell on the heads of the two groups of assassins. Early next morning, Marquis Pingbei's estate picked up Murong Wanru and spread the news. The entire spring hunt party was still on the road, but the Empress Dowager had long followed the Crown Prince to the main camp. She was planning to invite the Crown Prince for a walk after receiving the good news today. But in the end, man proposes, heaven disposes. Currently, she sat in a daze, expressionless and unmoving. Last night, she'd received news of a second wave of assassins, saying that Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru were both injured and brought back to the estate by His Highness Duke of Qin. She hadn't slept a wink, hoping that Murong Wanru had made her move before she got hurt. But she never expected things to turn out like this. After all, she'd been waiting all night for news of Grand Concubine Yi's death. She was waiting for the Long Fei Yi to find the 3 needles on Grand Concubine Yi's body and accuse Han Yunxi of colluding with outsiders to commit murder. How could she accept this result? Grand Concubine Yi wasn't dead, but Murong Wanru was. From what she understood of Grand Concubine Yi, how could she give up power? Could it be that Han Yunxi had some sort of weakness that could be used against her? But what kind of weakness could Grand Concubine Yi have for Han Yunxi to grasp? Mistress, could this be the Duke of Qin's intentions? Li Mama couldn't figure it out either, but this was the only possibility. Even if it's the Duke of Qin's intentions, it can't be that easy, right? The Empress Dowager still didn't believe it. While she was thinking, a young eunuch ran over to report in a low voice. Esteemed Empress Dowager, Eunuch Gu's here. The Empress Dowager waved her hand impatiently. Let him go. That blind thing. What's the point of investigating when the person's already gone? When the Empress Dowager had bribed Murong Wanru, she'd left a trick up her sleeve. To prevent her from betraying the Empress Dowager, she'd sent Eunuch Jiyu to investigate her origins and find her true relatives to keep her in check. Now Murong Wanru was no different from a corpse. It was useless to investigate any further. The eunuch was about to leave when Li Mama spoke up. Mistress, since you've already investigated, why don't you listen? No matter what, Murong Wanru's still lying in Marquis Pingbei's estate. I heard that Grand Concubine Yi even went to see her twice. Seeing the Empress Dowager remain silent, Li Mama ordered the eunuch to hurry and bring him in. But Eunuch Jiyu came with news as soon as he entered. To reply, esteemed Empress Dowager, this old servant followed the records of the past and found that all of Murong Wanru's closest relatives have already passed away. There's no news of any of her other relatives, so there's no way to find them. Murong Wanru had been personally chosen by the Empress to be Princess Changping's playgirl. She was only 6 years old and an orphan who had been raised by relatives. She was from the Chen village in the southern suburbs of the city. Because she was personally chosen by the Empress, Grand Concubine Yi didn't raise any suspicions at the time. Moreover, Grand Concubine Yi couldn't bear any more children after giving birth to the Duke of Qin. She especially liked daughters, so this matter was a matter of course. But after hearing Eunuch Gu's words, the Empress Dowager seemed to be enlightened. She smelled a familiar scent. Strange, there was something fishy about this. How could there be no relatives at all? Has Murong Wanru never contacted any of them these past few years? Li Mama was curious as well. The relatives who adopted her both died not long after she entered the palace. Later on, some of the relatives moved away, while others died. This old servant asked around in the Chen village, but no one knows the name Murong Wanru anymore, Eunuch Jiyu replied truthfully. The Empress Dowager fell silent, her eyes filled with shadows that flickered between light and darkness. Esteemed Empress Dowager, this old servant has already done his best. It's really. Before Eunuch Jiyu could finish, the Empress Dowager cut him off coldly. Li Mama, bring out the daily life of the Imperial Harem from the bottom of my chest, right now. The daily life of the Imperial Harem recorded the affairs of the concubines in the Imperial Harem, pregnancy, childbirth, and so on. Normally, the Empress Dowager was in charge of these matters. Naturally, the book in the Empress Dowager's hands recorded the events of the previous emperor's reign. Empress Dowager, what do you want to find out? Chapter 213. Of all the people present, Only the little eunuch didn't understand. Li Mimar and Eunuch Jiyu were both old men who'd served the Empress Dowager for decades. No matter how stupid they were, they'd seen their share of things after years in the palace. Both of them could figure out something fishy. In the past, no one suspected Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru because Murong Wanru had been invited into the palace by the Empress. Moreover, she hadn't been conferred a title, so no one had investigated. But now the results of the investigation were enough to raise the Empress Dowager's suspicions. Since Murong Wanru was favored by Grand Concubine Yi, she should have gone to the Murong family. Even if Murong Wanru distanced herself from the Murong family because of her birth, the Murong family should have taken the initiative to come knocking on her door. Based on this relationship alone, the local officials should have provided for them well. How did the Murong family end up without a single person? Grand Concubine Yi doted on Murong Wanru so much and treated her like her own. Besides fate, was there any other reason? As soon as the daily records of the imperial harem was delivered, the Empress Dowager flipped to the records of Grand Concubine Yi's birth. It recorded in detail the time Grand Concubine Yi had attended to her bed, the time of her wedding, the time of her birth, and the people who attended on the day of the birth. The Empress Dowager read line by line until Li Mimar couldn't help but murmur, "Mistress, the Duke of Qin is older than Murong Wanru by a year." The Empress Dowager didn't even raise her head as she said coldly, "She only entered the palace when she was 6. Who knows if she was really 6 then?" At these words, Li Mimar and Eunuch Jiyu exchanged glances. It looked like they'd thought of the same thing as the Empress Dowager. Cuaping, Shuangshi, Imperial Physician Lin, Gui Mimar, Nanny Chen, Mimar Su. The Empress Dowager used her long finger to point out the names recorded on it one by one, not missing a single one. "Eunuch Jiyu, go and find all these people for me. I want to interrogate them personally. Remember, no one is allowed to know about this." Eunuch Jiyu glanced at it and silently committed it to memory. "Mistress, don't worry. Your servant knows what to do." The Empress Dowager was very satisfied. She even gave the daily records of the imperial harem to Eunuch Jiyu. Her eyes flashed with a sharp light. "Grand Concubine Yi, Duke of Qin, you better pray for the protection of the heavens. Don't let me find out anything, or else I'll make your Duke of Qin's estate disappear from Tianning." Danger was unknowingly taking root and sprouting. He didn't know if Long Fei Yi had found Mother Su. Han Yunxi had been very busy this month, and she didn't care too much about his background, so she didn't ask much. She kept her promise to settle Murong Wanru down at Marquis Pingbei's estate, while Grand Concubine Yi kept her promise to no longer get involved in the affairs of the estate. Aside from the occasional visit to Marquis Pingbei's estate to see Murong Wanru, she spent most of her time in the peony courtyard. With the help of Steward Xia and Zhao Mema, Han Yunxi carried out bold and decisive reforms. She directly removed all of Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru's trusted aides and arranged for 2 reliable servant girls to serve in the peony courtyard. She also dismissed most of the idle staff, leaving only a few servant girls for Zhao Mema and a few page boys for Steward Xia. As for the defense, that was Chu Shifeng's responsibility. In the blink of an eye, the enormous organization had been reduced to 10 or so people. It was a refreshing change that increased efficiency and reduced the need for cliques and factions. It also helped to unify the hearts of the people. After taking care of these matters, Han Yunxi had one more important thing to do, and that was to move out of the hibiscus courtyard. It was Long Fei Yi's territory, so no one was allowed to enter without his permission. In the past, Han Yunxi had lingered in the courtyard because she feared Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru would cause trouble for her. Now that the trouble was gone, she couldn't keep loitering. After all, that fellow was not only obsessed with cleanliness, but his privacy as well. Han Yunxi stood by the window of her little loft and stared at Long Fei Yi's pitch-black sleeping quarters. She thought and hesitated for an entire night. She admitted that she was reluctant to leave, but she was clear that it was futile. There wouldn't be any results. The next morning, she moved decisively to a large, empty courtyard not far from Grand Concubine Yi. It was called the Narcissus Residence. After a busy day, she was so tired that she sprawled on the bed. She didn't want to move, but her head was still spinning. Most of the matters at the estate had come to an end, but her detox system still hadn't finished upgrading and regained its functions. Her mental state had recovered, but why hadn't the detox system recovered? Just how long would it take to upgrade? Could they give her a timetable? Fortunately, there hadn't been any major incidents that required her to use the detox system, or else she'd be crying. Esteemed Wang Fei, this old servant still doesn't think it's appropriate. For better or worse, you should at least greet His Highness, right? Zhao Mama was still nagging. She really didn't want esteemed Wang Fei to move out. Han Yunxi's ears were about to grow calluses. She waved a hand and said, Zhao Mama, it's getting late. You should go to sleep. All right, even Zhao Mama was tired of coaxing herself. She shook her head helplessly and silently withdrew. Han Yunxi opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling. Long Fei, you should be happy for her to move out, right? Why would he blame her for moving out without saying a word? Moreover, that busy man probably didn't have time to pay attention to such trifles. Heaven knows if he'd come back or not. Han Yunxi lazily rose to her feet and prepared to sleep, but it was then that Zhao Mema suddenly returned. Her face was full of mystery as she chuckled at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi felt her hairs stand on end under her gaze and said unhappily, if you have something to say, then say it. Zhao Mema's smile grew even happier. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness just sent someone with a message. His original words were, as Zhao Mema spoke, she cleared her throat and imitated Long Fei Yi's cold and domineering tone. She said, the things that were moved out of Hibiscus Courtyard today, within half an hour, move them all back to their original places for this prince. When these words came out, Han Yunxi was stunned. Zhao Mema's voice wasn't loud, but she felt her ears hurt from the vibrations. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness has given his orders. Please forgive me. Zhao Mema wasn't apologetic at all. She was grinning from ear to ear. With a wave of her hand, the people waiting outside the door all swarmed in. Other than the servant girls, there were also Steward Xia and the manservants. There were more than 10 people, all of whom were personally selected by Han Yunxi. Their movements were very nimble. They swarmed in like a swarm of bees and swarmed out like a swarm of bees. After a few trips, the large courtyard looked like it had been ransacked and emptied. Han Yunxi had always hated overbearing and unreasonable people, but when she looked at the empty room, she didn't know why, but she didn't feel disgusted at all. Instead, she felt an indescribable feeling. At this time, Zhao Mema came over again. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness has sent another message. Han Yunxi found that she was a little nervous. She anxiously asked, what message? However, Zhao Mema kept her in suspense. Esteemed Wang Fei, guess. Are you going to say it or not? Han Yunxi was about to get angry. Zhao Mema wasn't afraid of her. She smiled happily. Esteemed Wang Fei, His Highness said that everyone who came out has to go back. When these words came out, Han Yunxi's heartbeat suddenly sped up. He wanted her to move back. He was very domineering and forceful in ordering her to go back. So, she wasn't just hanging around before. So, Han Yunxi stared blankly at Zhao Mema, not speaking for a long time. Esteemed Wang Fei, this old servant is going back. What about you? Zhao Mema asked sneakily. Han Yunxi didn't answer. Instead, she turned around and ran straight to Hibiscus Courtyard. Zhao Mema was dumbstruck. She didn't react for a long time. What was wrong with her mistress? What kind of reaction was this? Han Yunxi ran to Long Fei Yi's sleeping quarters without stopping. When she saw that the lights in the palace were lit, she rushed in without thinking. Last night, she stood in front of the windowsill and hesitated all night. If she was being impulsive today, then let her be impulsive for once. She only wanted to ask why. Why did he want her to move back? She admitted that the throbbing in her heart was looking forward to a reason. But who knew that when she rushed in, she would see Long Fei Yi stripping off his clothes and about to step into the hot spring pool. Every part of his slender body was refined to perfection, the cold, hard lines of his body as perfect as a knife. The strong visual impact caused Han Yunxi to stop in her tracks and stiffen in place. She only felt blood rush to her head as she narrowly avoided having her heart and soul shatter. Even though her heart was on the verge of shattering, Han Yunxi's line of sight was still beyond her control. She couldn't look away no matter what. That unruly back, that sexy butt, those slender legs. Every part of it seemed to contain limitless power that made one's imagination run wild. At this moment, Han Yunxi only had one feeling. She was hopeless. Perhaps Han Yunxi didn't notice how hot her gaze was, but Long Feiyi felt it. He always hated this kind of delusion and peeping. But this time, he didn't reject it at all. Instead, he wanted to see the expression of the woman behind him. He reached out and grabbed a long robe from the side, casually wrapping it around his body. At this moment, Han Yunxi regained her senses. Long Feiyi had already turned around and looked at her. She was like a thief who had been caught red-handed. Her little face immediately turned red and she subconsciously turned to run. But Long Feiyi's figure flashed and blocked her way. He was really bad. He raised his eyebrows and sized her up, but didn't say a word. She lowered her head, her chin almost touching her neck. Her scalp was numb. She wished she could find a hole to hide in and return to the modern world. "Who let you in?" Finally, he spoke. The eloquent Han Yunxi stuttered, You, didn't you say you wanted me to come back? This prince asked you to return to Leisurely Cloud Pavilion." "I didn't ask you to come in," he retorted mercilessly. She panicked and blurted out, "Why did you ask me to return to Leisurely Cloud Pavilion?" She only came to her senses after she spoke. That's right, she came to ask him for a reason. Why? Long Feiyi didn't expect her to ask this. But he was still very strong. "This is an order. There's no reason." Han Yunxi secretly took a deep breath. She gathered her courage and looked up at him. "If there's no reason, I refuse to come back." Her cheeks and ears were still bright red, as if they were on fire. But her eyes were shining, serious and stubborn, staring straight into his eyes. The two of them looked at each other. The room was silent, and the world seemed to be quiet. Long Feiyi didn't answer for a long time, but Han Yunxi waited very seriously. "Long Feiyi, I think I like you just a little bit. Just a little bit. Give me an answer. Maybe my heart will die, or maybe my heart will be moved." Chapter 214. The night always made people impulsive. Hidden beneath the silence were surging waves. Han Yunxi could hear her own heart beating wildly. She was waiting for an answer. Why? His every word and action was only for himself. He didn't need to explain it to anyone else. Long Feiyi looked at the woman in front of him, his dark eyes as deep as the sea. His face remained expressionless, but a trace of complex emotions flashed through his eyes so quickly that no one noticed. "There's no why. This is an order," he finally spoke. "I refuse to obey." Han Yunxi didn't hesitate. "You have no room to refuse. Get out." His voice turned cold. Han Yunxi was stifled with anger. "Long Feiyi, living here is very..." But before she could finish, she stopped abruptly, her eyebrows knitting together. How could this be? Waves of dizziness rushed into her head, making it difficult for her to stand. What's wrong? Long Feiyi immediately saw through her abnormality. Han Yunxi held her head, stubbornly looking at Long Feiyi. She had a stubborn temper. Either she didn't ask, or she would ask clearly. She didn't care what was wrong with her. She'd already asked this much tonight, so she was determined to get a reason. She huffed, "Why? Answer me." But as soon as she finished speaking, her vision turned black and she fell forward. Long Feiyi hurriedly supported her. Seeing that she was already unconscious, he hurriedly picked her up by the waist and carried her to the bed, calling for an imperial physician. Imperial physician Li was frightened by His Highness Duke of Qin's anxious expression as soon as he arrived. He'd worked in the Duke of Qin's household for so many years, but he'd never seen His Highness Duke of Qin crease his brows even when Grand Concubine Yi was sick to death. He didn't dare delay and hurried to take her pulse. But after taking her pulse twice, he didn't find anything strange. Everything was normal. "What's wrong?" Long Feiyi asked. "Your Highness, the Princess Consort's pulse is stable and her blood is abundant. It shouldn't be like this. Dr. Li was completely puzzled. Long Fei Yi didn't even look at Imperial Physician Li and said impatiently, Granny Zhao, go and ask Jiyu Beiyu to come here immediately. Hearing this, Imperial Dr. Li could only leave. If it was someone else, he would not be convinced, but since it was Imperial Dr. Jiyu, he had nothing to say. Jiyu Beiyu had rushed over in the middle of the night. He had originally thought that he would be going to the Leisurely Cloud Pavilion, but who knew that Granny Zhao would bring him to the sleeping quarters. Passing through the dark and gloomy corridor, they arrived at a brightly lit area far ahead. Under the cover of heavy curtains, Han Yunxi was lying quietly on the couch. Long Fei Yi was sitting beside her, guarding her. Time seemed to have frozen at this moment into a beautiful picture scroll. Jiyu Beiyu looked at it silently and unconsciously slowed down his pace. Imperial Physician Jiyu, walk faster. His Highness is anxious. Granny Zhao urged in a low voice. Jiyu Beiyu immediately walked over and sat down with a layer of gauze between them. Long Fei Yi did not make a sound as he carefully placed Han Yunxi's hand on the pulse pillow. His actions were even gentler than Jiyu Beiyu's. Jiyu Beiyu carefully took her pulse. Long Fei Yi finally spoke, I asked you to take a look before. It should be an old illness. Last time, Han Yunxi had been unconscious for several days in Medicine City. After returning, Long Fei Yi had ordered Jiyu Beiyu to come over. At that time, the diagnosis was that she had been overworked and frightened. But this time, there was no need to mention the frightened state. With this woman's courage, it was impossible for her to be frightened. As for being overworked, the affairs of the manor for a month shouldn't have caused her to fall ill from exhaustion. Jiyu Beiyu let go of Han Yunxi's hand. Your Highness, can this official take a look at esteemed Wang Fei's complexion? Long Fei Yi lifted a corner of the curtain. Jiyu Beiyu stood up to take a look, but did not say anything. He sat back down and continued to take her pulse. How is it? Long Fei Yi anxiously asked. Your Highness, please calm down. Allow this official to take a closer look. Jiyu Beiyu said in a low voice. After being reminded by Jiyu Beiyu, Long Fei Yi finally realized his own impatience. He looked to the side and did not speak again. Although her pulse was normal, Jiyu Beiyu could clearly feel that even though Han Yunxi was unconscious, her entire body was tense. It was as if something was constantly consuming her energy. Other doctors wouldn't be able to tell, but Jiyu Beiyu could. Even so, he couldn't explain it. In the end, he let go of Han Yunxi's hand and said, Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei's pulse is normal. There's no serious illness, but I'm afraid esteemed Wang Fei has something on her mind that she's brooding over. She spent the night worrying and wasting her mental energy, causing her to faint from exhaustion. Long Fei Yi seemed to think of something. He glanced back at Han Yunxi without a word. Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei's condition is rare. This is only this official's guess. We'll have to wait for esteemed Wang Fei to wake up and ask her in detail before we can confirm it. Jiyu Beiyu was very cautious. Zhao Mama, take Imperial Physician Jiyu to the West Wing to rest, Jun Beiyu ordered in a low voice. He wanted Jiyu Beiyu to wait until she woke up. Aside from the palace, this was probably the only place where Jiyu Beiyu could stay. Of course, Jiyu Beiyu was very willing to stay. He was about to leave when Long Fei Yi suddenly asked, Imperial Physician Jiyu, I heard you were injured by an assassin at the Han estate that day? Thank you for your Highness's concern. This official saw the assassin that day. On her left was the poison pond that she had stolen from Medicine City. The pond was filled with all kinds of new poisonous herbs. In fact, when Han Yunxi hid these things inside, she couldn't imagine what kind of form these things would be stored in the detoxification system. Looking at everything in front of her, she almost thought that the poison pond and poisonous herbs were native to the detoxification system and not foreign things. She didn't steal anyone's pond, but the poison water had formed a pond of its own here. The poisonous herbs in the pond were growing especially vigorously. Many of the poisonous herbs had already begun to show their toxicity. Han Yunxi walked closer and casually planted an unknown flower. Then, a reminder from the detoxification system sounded in her mind. The pollen is poisonous and can cause itching. Scratch until you see blood to stop the itching. The antidote is still being prepared and will take about half a year. Please do not touch it casually. Hearing this, Han Yunshi was so scared that she immediately let go. Good heavens, this poison will only be cured after half a year. Han Yunshi hesitated for a moment and carefully plucked another herb. Who knew that at this time, the detoxification system's reminder was, the toxicity of this herb is still being analyzed. It will take 3 months. What a ridiculous speed. However, Han Yunshi was still shocked. One had to know that before, the detoxification system couldn't analyze the toxicity of the poison pond. Now, it could actually analyze the poison raised by the poison pond and could even prepare an antidote. So, this was a new function added after the upgrade. She could find the raw materials of the poison and let the detoxification system cultivate them and prepare an antidote. This was simply great news. What Junyi Xie wanted to do in the medicinal herb forest, she snatched it and did it here. In other words, she had become the most dangerous person in the world of poison. Thinking of this, the corners of Han Yunshi's mouth gently parted, revealing a trace of a sinister smile. The detoxification system carried a portion of poisons that didn't exist in ancient times. However, it was only a portion. Moreover, the type was singular and the quantity was very limited. For example, strong anesthetics. Now that she had the cultivation function of the detoxification system, would she still be afraid that she didn't have any miraculous medicines? Hiding from the dense poisonous pond, Han Yunshi was especially looking forward to the day when she would have a good harvest. Other than the storage room and the poisonous pond, the surroundings were empty. In the distance, it was so dark that she couldn't even see her own fingers if she stretched out her hand. This space was so big, could it be hiding some secrets that she didn't know? Han Yunshi tried to walk forward, but who knew that as soon as she walked past the poisonous pond, she would immediately feel dizzy. She couldn't even take another step forward. Her vision turned black and she immediately fainted. She fainted in the detoxification system, but in reality, she opened her eyes without warning. She saw an incomparably luxurious round canopy above her head. Hey, what is this place? Han Yunshi looked to the side in a daze, only to see. Chapter 215. Han Yunshi looked to the side in a daze, only to see Long Fei Yi leaning on the side with his eyes closed. That grave and stern face that angered both men and gods was especially quiet at this moment, like a painting. No matter how one looked at it, it was a kind of enjoyment. Han Yunshi was shocked and subconsciously pursed her lips, afraid that she would wake him up. Only then did she realize that she was actually sleeping on the bed in his bedchamber. Above her head was a towering and luxurious umbrella-shaped canopy, below her was an extremely soft white fox fur coat, and covered her body with a silk brocade quilt that was as light as goose feathers. Around her was the same fresh scent as his body, with a unique faint scent of ambergris. While everything displayed his nobility, it also represented this man's most private sleeping preferences and habits. Lying here was equivalent to completely stepping into his world, and it was terrifying. She wanted to get up, but she was infatuated with this comfort and safety. At this moment, Long Fei Yi suddenly opened his eyes and glanced at her from the corner of his eyes. "You're awake." When did he wake up? Or was he not asleep all this time and was just pretending to be asleep? "I just woke up, What's wrong?" She pretended to be confused. She knew that once the detoxification system's upgrade was completed, she would completely return to normal. She couldn't enter the unknown realm in the detoxification space. Presumably, it still needed to be developed and upgraded. If the poison pond's water triggered the detoxification system's upgrade, what else could trigger the detoxification system's second upgrade? How many unknown functions were still waiting to be developed? Han Yunshi couldn't think of anything, but she believed that the surprises would only get bigger and bigger. She was in a daze when Long Fei Yi suddenly asked, "Do you have something on your mind?" Why did he suddenly ask this? This time, Han Yunshi was really at a loss. She shook her head, her eyes especially innocent. "No. I might be too tired during this period of time." My body is a little weak. Did you encounter any trouble? Long Fei Yi asked again. Han Yunxi didn't understand and still shook her head. Was there a direct relationship between her worries and her coma? Long Fei Yi gave her a deep look before rising to his feet. Zhao Memar, summon Imperial Physician Ji over. Han Yunxi couldn't understand Long Fei Yi's gaze. It wasn't until Ji Beiyu roughly explained the diagnosis that she understood what was going on. She only wanted to say that Ji Beiyu was simply a genius. He was so close to digging out the root of the problem. Esteemed Princess Consort, those who overwork their minds are prone to illness. If you have any worries, don't keep them to yourself. Your health is more important. It would be a lie to say that Ji Beiyu wasn't curious, but with Long Fei Yi by his side, he couldn't ask too many questions. All he did was prescribe some medicine to calm the nerves and take his leave. Long Fei Yi leaned to the side and crossed his arms. Coldly, he asked, "What is it that you can't let go of? Tell me so that I can consider it." Everything in the Han family was going smoothly, the medical center was becoming more and more famous, and she had just taken power in the Duke of Qin's manor. It was as if she had regained her freedom. What kind of worries did this woman have? Of course, she herself was a mystery, so there were naturally things that he couldn't control. With her temperament, what could have caused her to lose her mind and be so exhausted that she fainted? Long Fei Yi really wanted to know. Coldly, he looked at Han Yunxi, waiting for her answer. Han Yunxi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even if the sky fell, she wouldn't do anything that would make her depress. Ignoring Long Fei Yi's questioning gaze, she got off the bed and lightly said, "Your Highness, this concubine is really fine." Han Yunxi, are you hiding something from this prince? Long Fei Yi persistently wanted to know. However, this suspicious tone made Han Yunxi very uncomfortable. Who was he to her? She had plenty of things that she didn't want him to know, okay? Han Yunxi turned around and patiently said, "This concubine does have something on her mind. This concubine's heart is flustered and can't think through it. This concubine is also angry." Flustered and angry? Did someone bully her? A trace of seriousness flashed through Long Fei Yi's cold eyes, but he didn't make a sound and waited for her to continue. Han Yunxi didn't hesitate and directly said, "Your Highness, this concubine just doesn't understand why Your Highness wants this concubine to move back. Although this concubine is only a Qin Wangfei in name, does this concubine not have a place to live in such a large Duke of Qin's manor?" She hadn't forgotten that she had fainted. With her personality, since she had asked, there was no reason for her to back down. She had to get an answer. Long Fei Yi didn't expect this and his brows furrowed. Han Yunxi, on the other hand, was very relaxed. She smoothed out her bangs, her eyes bright and magnanimous. "Your Highness, isn't it good that this concubine doesn't disturb you when she moves out? Why do you want this concubine to move back?" Looking at this woman's fearless gaze that dared to love and hate, Long Fei Yi's gaze also became heated. He was just a little bit away from indulging himself. However, in the end, coldness replaced the heat in his eyes. He didn't even look at Han Yunxi and coldly said, "No reason. If you want to move, then move." After he finished speaking, he walked past Han Yunxi expressionlessly and quickly disappeared through the door. Even after he had left, Han Yunxi seemed to be stunned at that moment. She only felt that her heart had suddenly become empty, as if it had been hollowed out. Even her brain was empty and she couldn't think for a moment. Her palms hurt badly, as if countless ants were gnawing on them. It hurt so much that she had to clench her hands tightly to relieve the pain. Why, even though she only liked him a little, why was there so much sadness? Esteemed Princess Consort, esteemed Princess Consort. Han Yunxi only regained her senses when Zhao Memar came over with the medicine. Esteemed Princess Consort, this was just brewed. Imperial Physician Ji Yu instructed you to drink it while it's hot. Zhao Memar urged. Han Yunxi looked over but didn't move. Esteemed Princess Consort, if there's anything on your mind, why don't you tell this old servant? Don't keep it in your heart. It's not good for your health. You didn't see how worried His Highness was about you. He was always by your side. Zhao Memar said seriously. Wasn't it because he was still suspicious of her? Wasn't he very curious about Madame Tianxin's background? Han Yunxi smiled and said indifferently, "There's no need to brew this medicine. I'm fine. Pass down the order to immediately move everything in Leisurely Cloud Pavilion back to Narcissus residence. From now on, it will be called Leisurely Cloud Courtyard." Zhao Mama didn't expect this and was so shocked that she almost dropped the medicine in her hands. "Esteemed Princess Consort, why?" "But His Highness knows. Do it immediately. I'm still waiting to catch up on sleep," Han Yunxi coldly ordered and left after she finished speaking. Her figure was graceful and her steps were free and easy. She had a unique strength of character. Since she dared to ask, she could accept any answer. It was good that she could move out. She was free and her heart was free. As for the rest, she thought, who cares? The most depressed people were none other than Granny Zhao and housekeeper Xia. They had moved 3 times in a day, and the last time was when the sun was about to rise. They really couldn't understand what the 2 masters were up to. Almost all of the servants were secretly betting that the 2 masters would continue to make a fuss. But Long Fei Yi didn't ask any more questions, while Han Yunxi settled down in Leisurely Cloud Courtyard. The next few days passed peacefully. Just like that, the days passed until one day the Empress Dowager came to visit Grand Concubine Yi. Since the assassination plot had failed, the Empress Dowager was probably in a bad mood. She hadn't even come to visit when the incident had spread like wildfire. Why would she come again after a month? Han Yunxi couldn't figure it out. The number of times the Empress Dowager had visited the Duke of Qin's estate could be counted on one hand, but every time she did, she'd put on a grand show of honor. Everyone in the estate would come out to greet her, including Grand Concubine Yi. After exhausting the people, money, and mind, she'd finally invited this great Buddha to the main seat in the main hall. Compared to the Empress Dowager, Han Yunxi suddenly felt that Grand Concubine Yi wasn't so hateful after all. "Grand Concubine Yi, I know everything about the assassination attempt." The Empress Dowager's words were full of brazen provocation. She knew everything. She knew the ins and outs of the whole thing, right? But neither Grand Concubine Yi nor Han Yunxi could expose her. Leaving aside the fact that they had no proof, even if they did, it wouldn't be easy to topple her. After all, she had the Emperor backing her up. "Grand Concubine Yi, you've been frightened. Poor Wanru, that child, what a good child. Why do you think her life is so bitter?" The Empress Dowager sighed with emotion. Grand Concubine Yi was exhausted from the Empress Dowager's ceremonial procession early in the morning. Hearing these words, she almost couldn't hide the fury in her eyes. If not for the fact that she was clenching her fists tightly in her sleeves, she would have exploded long ago. The Empress Dowager loved to see Grand Concubine Yi like this. She sighed and continued, "Grand Concubine Yi, you're only her foster mother, but your heart is still hurt because of her. If her birth parents found out about this, what would happen?" Grand Concubine Yi's face was ghastly white as her body trembled uncontrollably. She seemed ready to throw herself at the Empress Dowager and perish together with her. Han Yunxi immediately sensed that something was wrong. The Empress Dowager seemed to be testing something. She quickly walked over and pressed down on Grand Concubine Yi's shoulders to give her strength. "Mu Fei, it's already happened. Don't think too much about it. It's good that you're all right. Otherwise, it would be His Highness, and Chunxie who would be sad." Han Yunxi emphasized the words His Highness. Only then did Grand Concubine Yi calm down from her rage. She silently exhaled and picked up her tea to sip. Only then did the Empress Dowager look at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi happened to look at her as well, their eyes meeting. Han Yunxi didn't back down, but changed the topic. "Empress Dowager, is esteemed Empress feeling better? Does she still miss Princess Changping? Who didn't know how to pick at scars? Lady Tianxin had saved her life, while she'd saved the Crown Prince's. This old thing still bit the hand that fed her. In the future, she better not ask Han Yunxi for help again. Otherwise, she'd definitely get back at her with interest." Han Yunxi's 2 questions were simply rubbing salt on the Empress Dowager's scars. The Empress Dowager's face immediately sank. "Han Yunxi, I'm talking to your Mufei. There's no place for you to butt in. Han Yunshi put on a false smile. Chunqie is only concerned about esteemed Empress. I hope esteemed Empress Dowager will forgive me. She's bringing up the Empress again. The Empress Dowager was furious. On one side, Li Mama quickly spoke up. Mistress, don't forget about proper business. We're here for Miss Wanru's matters. Han Yunshi grew doubtful. What's there to do with Murong Wanru? The Empress Dowager adjusted her breathing and resumed her graceful, luxurious posture. I was so happy to see Grand Concubine Yi well that I forgot all about it. She smiled at Grand Concubine Yi and said sincerely, Grand Concubine Yi, don't be sad. I've asked the Emperor for a title for Wanru. She's been serving you for so many years, so she should have a title as well. The Emperor said that the imperial edict will be sent to her family in the countryside, so she can bring honor to her ancestors. You have to make preparations and find everyone. Don't make a fool of yourself. Han Yunshi and Grand Concubine Yi were both startled by these words. The imperial edict should have been sent to Marquis Pingbei's estate, but to her family in the countryside. What did that mean? Chapter 216. The Empress Dowager wanted to send the imperial edict to Murong Wanru's family, but Grand Concubine Yi had already taken care of all of them. No, to be more precise, Murong Wanru's family was part of Tianning's imperial family. The Empress Dowager's actions went against common sense, putting Grand Concubine Yi and Han Yunshi on guard. They exchanged glances, not daring to linger too long in tacit understanding. Could it be that the old Empress Dowager had discovered some clues? Was she here today to test Grand Concubine Yi? No one would be more flustered than Grand Concubine Yi in the face of such probing. Still, she wasn't someone easy to deal with. No matter how turbulent her heart was, her face didn't reveal any flaws. She didn't even avoid the question, but asked back, Wanru is already part of Marquis Pingbei's estate. It wouldn't be appropriate to send an imperial edict back to her family, would it? But the Empress Dowager's reply was even better. I thought so as well, but the Emperor must have his reasons for doing so. I don't have time to figure out his intentions. Emperor Tianhui's intentions? Han Yunshi grew even more stunned at these words. She was almost certain that the Empress Dowager and Emperor knew something about Murong Wanru's origins. Even if they didn't know, they must have suspected something. Otherwise, the Empress Dowager wouldn't have spoken so bluntly today. This wasn't a test at all, but a warning. Grand Concubine Yi was as steady as Mount Tai with a soft smile. Since it's the Emperor's intentions, then we'll do as he says. But I took Wanru from the Empress's hands in the past, so I don't know much about her family. Now that she's unconscious, it looks like we'll have to ask the Empress if we want to find her family. Han Yunshi silently admired Grand Concubine Yi. Even at this critical juncture, she still kept her cool and purposely brought up the Empress. This made the Empress Dowager's smug smile stiffen a few degrees. What? Wanru hasn't interacted with her family all these years, the Empress Dowager questioned. That's her business. It's not like you don't know that I hate those vulgar farmers and women who come to my house and claim to be relatives. The Duke of Qin's mansion has its own rules. Even if Wanru has dealings with the main family, she has to do it secretly. Grand Concubine Yi's face was full of disdain as she gracefully leaned back in her chair. Her careless attitude made it impossible for the Empress Dowager to ask any more questions. The Empress Dowager and Grand Concubine Yi were both shrewd old people who could keep their cool. But Li Mama couldn't help but probe again. Since that's the case, then we'll have to have the Xiu Palace investigate. Grand Concubine Yi nodded, indicating that she had no objections. The Empress Dowager's eyes flashed with a touch of complexity, but she did not ask any more questions. After chatting for a while, she got up and returned to the palace. But as soon as he left, Grand Concubine Yi's legs turned to jelly as soon as she stood up. She immediately fell back into her seat, her face ashen white as she stared blankly at Han Yunshi. It was a while before she spoke. Why did she suspect? Now isn't the time to investigate her suspicions. We need to figure out where Mama Su is. Han Yunshi could be considered calm. The Empress Dowager must have investigated Murong Wanru's family and found no one, so she came to sound them out. She must have gotten hold of some information to give such an arrogant warning. But that wasn't the most frightening thing. The most frightening thing was that the Empress Dowager's words implied that Emperor Tianhui had his eyes on this matter as well. As soon as she thought of that cold and cruel emperor, Han Yunshi couldn't help but shiver. She and Long Fei Yi had already offended him to death. As soon as he got hold of something to use against them, the consequences would be unthinkable. Right now, Mema Su was the only one who knew what happened back then. This person was the proof. Have you found her? Grand Concubine Yi asked hastily. She had no idea that it was Long Fei Yi who had done the searching instead of Han Yunshi. Han Yunshi hadn't seen Long Fei Yi for days, so she wasn't clear on the situation. After some hesitation, she comforted, "Don't be impatient. Even if they know of Mema Su's existence, they might not be able to find her." But Grand Concubine Yi grew anxious. No, she has the daily records of the Imperial Harem in her hands as well as the personnel records from the Jingsha department. Mema Su worked in the palace for so many years that she must have left behind plenty of information. It'll be much easier for her to find her than us. It wasn't that Grand Concubine Yi hadn't thought about the daily records of the Imperial Harem and personnel records, but these things were all under the Empress Dowager's control. She didn't dare to act rashly and startle the snake. Moreover, after the late emperor passed away, these records had been kept by the Empress Dowager. She couldn't get her hands on them even if she wanted to. She always assumed that no one had ever suspected Wanru's origins. After all these years, she assumed that everything would sink like a stone into the sea. But who knew that man's schemes couldn't beat heaven's? Wanru had actually hooked up with the Empress Dowager. After thinking it over calmly, it wasn't strange for the Empress Dowager to suspect Wanru. With the Empress Dowager's suspicious personality, she'd naturally investigate Wanru's background before using her. Han Yunshi never thought of the daily records of the Imperial Harem and personnel records. Only now did she realize the severity of the situation. After comforting Grand Concubine Yi with a few words, Han Yunshi didn't dare delay. She immediately went to the hibiscus courtyard to find Long Fei Yi, but didn't see a single trace of him. Instead, she discovered that her leisurely cloud pavilion had been torn down. Han Yunshi thought that she'd be able to keep her cool, but her heart still clenched in pain. Was that fellow trying to draw a clear line between them and never let her move back? Was he telling her to give up on that heart of his? Since he didn't mean it, why did he let her know about the Tang clan's secrets and let her get so close? Han Yunshi stood in front of the leisurely cloud pavilion for a while before ignoring everything and hurrying towards the solitary enclosure. A second late was too late, but a second early was too early. By the time Han Yunshi arrived, Long Fei Yi was just about to leave the house. It had been a few days since she'd seen him, but he was still cold, aloof, and inviolable. She wasn't unfamiliar with him, but simply told him about the Empress Dowager's visit. They must have gotten hold of some clues, or else the Empress Dowager wouldn't act so rashly, she said anxiously. Still, he wasn't in a rush. Coldly, he said, "You're even more anxious than Grand Concubine Yi." Han Yunshi felt uncomfortable hearing those words. She admitted frankly, "Of course I'm anxious. Dozens of lives in the Duke of Qin's estate are tied to this matter, including me. I don't want to fall into Emperor Tianhui's hands. That's a reason." Long Fei Yi nodded his head in satisfaction. He didn't explain, but said, "Go back and wait for news. I'll wait for His Highness's good news." She didn't ask or waste words, but turned to leave, leaving behind a confident figure. But just as Han Yunshi was about to leave, Long Fei Yi suddenly called after her. "Han Yunshi." Han Yunshi turned to look at him. "Does your highness have any other orders? Since you don't want to fall into Emperor Tianhui's hands, then take a trip with your lordship," Long Fei Yi said, his emotions unreadable. "Go with him to find Mema Su?" He had news. Han Yunshi was still lost in thought when Long Fei Yi mounted his horse and came to her side. He didn't explain a thing, but reached out his hand. "Fine, I'll go. Who's afraid of him?" Han Yunshi didn't hesitate to give her small hand to his. Her hand was very cold, slender and boneless. His hand was even colder, the bones of his fingers distinct. When the two hands clasped together, there was a strange attraction between them that made both of them feel comfortable. As soon as she got on the horse, he let go of her hand, but kept an arm around her waist while the other pulled on the reins to spur the horse forward. Han Yunshi thought she could stay calm as she leaned against the familiar embrace. But in the end, she lost herself in the familiar scent of ambergris. Gradually, her thoughts wandered until she didn't even know how she arrived at Medicine City. Finally, Han Yunshi grew curious. "What are we doing here? We've received news that Mama Su is working as a servant in Medicine City's Mu clan. They'll come tonight to take her away," Long Feiyi said mildly as he hid in the shadows of the city gates. Han Yunshi was surprised. She never expected Mama Su to sneak into Medicine City, much less news of the Empress Dowager. No wonder she was so arrogant when she first arrived at the Duke of Qin's estate. But on second thought, she felt something was off. She wouldn't be so high-profile before she got her hands on the person. Wasn't she afraid of beating the grass and startling the snake? Han Yunshi couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. Just as she was about to ask for more details, the city gates opened and a carriage slowly drove out, followed by several black-clothed experts. It was obvious that the carriage belonged to the palace. "They're here." As soon as the carriage exited the city gates, it sped off. Long Feiyi followed on horseback and soon left Medicine City's gates, entering a dark forest. If they made a move here, they wouldn't alert the people of Medicine City. Han Yunshi thought that Long Feiyi was about to make his move. But who would have thought that the carriage in front of them would come to an abrupt stop? The black-clothed experts all turned around to look at them, as if they already knew they were following them. Han Yunshi was shocked, but Long Feiyi was very calm and slowly came to a stop. What was going on? One of the black-clothed experts was kneeling beside the carriage. The person inside the carriage stepped on the expert's back and elegantly walked down. She was actually a cool and elegant beauty. She was a full head taller than Han Yunshi. She wore a fiery red chipao with a high collar that accentuated the beautiful curve of her neck. The opening almost reached the base of her thighs. As she walked, her well-proportioned and slender legs were faintly discernible, causing one's heart to flutter. Not only did she have a good figure, but she also had a beautiful face. Her facial features were well-defined, bright and moving. Some people said that kipaos were very tight and had openings lower than the knees. Those were the daughters of noble families who didn't step out of the house and had to take small, quick steps. Kipaos were loose and had openings that reached the knees. That was for ordinary housewives, purely for ease of work. But this type of chipao, with openings that reached the thighs, was for prostitutes. However, this red-clothed woman didn't have the slightest bit of a prostitute's aura. She was cool and moving, emitting an innate sense of superiority. The pride and confidence in her eyes let Han Yunshi know that this woman's background wasn't ordinary. She couldn't be Mother Su. Han Yunshi immediately understood that this was a trap. The Empress Dowager deliberately released the news to lure Long Feiyi here. However, seeing Long Feiyi's calm appearance, Han Yunshi didn't worry too much. The red-clothed woman disdainfully glanced at Han Yunshi. When her gaze fell on Long Feiyi, her cold and arrogant expression became gentle. She joked, "Your Highness Duke of Qin is actually riding on the same horse as a woman. Is Schwanger having a nightmare?" Han Yunshi originally planned to quietly watch how Long Feiyi would deal with this trap. Who knew that the other party not only knew Long Feiyi, but also pointed the spearhead at her. She could see the love and hatred in this woman's eyes. In reality, she and Long Feiyi were just riding on the same horse. It didn't mean anything. However, since the other party had already said this, how could she back down? Chapter 217. Although she wasn't as tall as the woman, Han Yunshi was sitting on Long Feiyi's exclusive horse. Her aura alone was enough to suppress the other woman. She looked down disdainfully and teased. This Wang Fei thought that all the women in the world had nightmares after this Wang Fei married His Highness. Miss Schwanger's nightmares came a little too late, didn't they? All the women in the world. Han Yunshi wasn't exaggerating. Of Cloud Realm Continent's 3 princes, Tianning's Duke of Qin was the most adored by all the women in the world. But no woman in the world could win his favor. Han Yunshi knew she was no exception, but since she was sitting on Long Fei Yi's horse today, she wouldn't allow herself to back down. She still remembered Grand Concubine Yi's words, no matter what, she couldn't lose face for the Duke of Qin's household. So this is Qin Wangfei. Shuang'er heard that on the day of the wedding, Leng Shuang trailed off with a meaningful smile and introduced herself. This one is Leng Shuang of the City of Daughters. There were 4 cities in the world: Medical City, Medicine City, Carefree City, and the City of Daughters. Medical City had its medical academy, Medicine City had its 3 great clans, while Carefree City and the City of Daughters both had their own city lord system. Carefree City was ruled by the Qi clan, while the City of Daughters was ruled by the Leng clan. Han Yunshi's guesses were right. This woman's origins weren't small, but what did that have to do with her? She was very honest. I don't know you. Leng Shuang assumed that the lowly Han Yunshi would feel ashamed after revealing her identity, but she ended up losing face instead. Of course, Leng Shuang didn't stop there. She acted as if she didn't mind and said, I'm the 4th young miss of the Leng clan, a contender for the future head of the Leng clan. I've known His Highness Duke of Qin for a long time. Qin Wangfei isn't a kindred spirit, so it's normal that you don't know me. These words were telling Han Yunshi that they were from different worlds and that Han Yunshi wasn't worthy of His Highness Duke of Qin. Unexpectedly, Han Yunshi remained lofty and said lazily, since you've stated your clan so clearly, this Wangfei will treat it as knowing someone like you. Her words made it sound like Leng Shuang was eager to introduce herself and hope that Han Yunshi would remember her. On the social scene, only those who were of lower status but were eager to make friends with someone of a higher status would take the initiative to report their background in detail. Otherwise, once the name was thrown out, it would mean everything, and there would be no need for others to ask. Leng Shuang's background was indeed miles ahead of Han Yunshi's, but she just so happened to meet a Han Yunshi who didn't even care about her own background. If she didn't care about her own background, why would she care about someone else's? Showing off in front TSS. Looking at the calm and composed Han Yunshi, the arrogant Leng Shuang couldn't understand where Han Yunshi's confidence came from. But this was the first time in her life that she felt inferior in front of a girl her age. She didn't want to admit it, but she wasn't willing. Killing intent flashed through her eyes, but seeing that Long Fei Yi was present, she didn't act out. She maintained her smile and calmly changed the topic. Isn't Your Highness Duke of Qin curious why Shuang'er is in the palace sedan? Compared to the likes of Princess Changping and Duanmu Yarrow, this woman was much more rational and cool-headed. She knew the big picture and wasn't the type to throw tantrums for no good reason. It was no wonder she was one of the candidates to succeed the City of Daughters. This prince isn't interested. Compared to Han Yunshi, Long Fei Yi was the real lofty one. Leng Shuang was famous for being cold and elegant, but unfortunately, she still couldn't enter his eyes. Cold as he finished speaking, he turned his horse around and prepared to leave. But at this time, the experts that Leng Shuang brought with her immediately spread out and surrounded them. Duke of Qin, someone in the City of Daughters offered a sky-high price for 10 experts to buy your head. Shuang'er took on all of them. Shouldn't you properly thank Shuang'er? Leng Shuang smiled. Medicine City valued medicine, Medical City valued doctors. The City of Daughters and Carefree City were ruled by assassins and mercenaries. The City of Daughters valued women over men, while Carefree City valued men over women. There were crouching tigers and hidden dragons in these 2 cities. The Leng clan and the Qi clan were assassin clans with the longest histories. Han Yunshi glanced around and discovered that there were exactly 10 black-clothed experts. She was still shocked. She could ignore Leng Shuang's identity, but she couldn't ignore Leng Shuang's ability. To actually come to the City of Daughters and offer a sky-high reward, the Empress Dowager's move was too ruthless. 1 against 10 wasn't something fun. Since Leng Shuang accepted the Empress Dowager's reward, how could she come here for nothing? Long Fei Yi swept his gaze over the 10 people and sneered, "You think too highly of yourself. He, Long Fei Yi, hated owing people favors, especially to women. Lung Shuang wasn't angry. She actually pouted her delicate red lips and said coquettishly, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, this will make things difficult for Shuang. The reputation of the City of Daughters can't be destroyed. How many men in the world could resist a cold beauty like her?" When she lowered herself and acted coquettishly. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi didn't even look at Lung Shuang. He didn't even deign to speak to her. He grabbed Han Yunxi and rode away. With a glance from Lung Shuang, the 10 experts flew out like arrows. A few of them blocked Long Fei Yi's path and brandished their swords to attack Long Fei Yi's horse. Killing intent flashed past Long Fei Yi's eyes as he grabbed Han Yunxi and took to the skies. At the same time, the horse's limbs were all chopped off, causing it to wail in anguish. Long Fei Yi landed on the ground and the 10 experts surrounded them. They didn't take any further action, but Han Yunxi could clearly sense the killing intent emanating from their bodies. It was different from any of the experts she'd met before. These were professional assassins, and the best of the best. Lung Shuang walked over with a sincere look in her eyes. "Duke of Qin, since Tianning's imperial clan can't tolerate you, why don't you come back to the City of Daughters with Shuang? Madame Lung won't treat you unfairly." Lung Shuang had been hired to rope in Long Fei Yi. It had to be said that this was wishful thinking on her part. It was also Long Fei Yi's charm. Han Yunxi assumed that Long Fei Yi would say no, but this man didn't even bother to say no. Cold as he said, "Even if you chop off your lordship's horse, your lordship won't tolerate you." How domineering. Han Yunxi was awed, and so was Lung Shuang. Her eyes shone with fanatical worship. If not for her clan's mission, she wouldn't want to offend this man no matter what. However, Tianning's Empress Dowager's bounty had been personally accepted by the Lung clan head. He wanted to use this as an excuse to rope in the Duke of Qin, so she couldn't disobey orders. She had to bring Long Fei Yi back. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, please instruct me." As soon as Lung Shuang finished speaking, the 10 experts all made their moves. For a moment, the glint of blades and the shadow of swords filled the air with killing intent. Long Fei Yi held on to Han Yunxi with one hand and held his sword with the other as he fought against the 10 swords. The shadows of his sword flashed like lightning as they clashed fiercely. The 10 experts' swords were very fast, but Long Fei Yi's was even faster. Han Yunxi wanted to use her hidden weapons to help, but she couldn't find a chance. She only felt the shadows of swords flickering in front of her. She couldn't even tell who they belonged to and was afraid that she'd be more of a hindrance than a help. Han Yunxi had seen Long Fei Yi's swordsmanship many times before. His skills were cold and severe, and his sword chi was domineering. Basically, his sword would slice the throat as soon as it left his hand, and he could eliminate a whole group of assassins with ease. After all, Long Fei Yi's swordsmanship was taught by Tianshan Kens and lived up to its reputation. However, this time, Long Fei Yi still couldn't gain the upper hand after more than 30 moves. Moreover, he was still standing in the same place, which was equivalent to being pinned down. The assassins carefully selected by the Lung family of the City of Daughters really couldn't be underestimated. Han Yunxi realized that there was always someone better than you. There were so many experts and the world was so big. Of course, it was 10 against 1, and they still had to protect her. Although Long Fei Yi was pinned down, he was still able to fight freely. This was already considered very strong, and the 10 experts secretly admired him. If they were to fight Long Fei Yi one-on-one, Long Fei Yi would definitely win. Thus, even if Long Fei Yi couldn't win, he didn't show any signs of losing. They couldn't guarantee that Long Fei Yi didn't have any reinforcements. Once reinforcements arrived, things would be troublesome. When one of the assassins was dodging, he gave Lung Shuang a look. Lung Shuang immediately understood. Actually, even without the assassin's reminder, she knew that she had to take action. Moreover, her target was Han Yunxi. Although she didn't want to admit it, at this moment, Han Yunxi, who was in Long Fei Yi's arms, was indeed Long Fei Yi's only weakness. Very good, take this opportunity to get rid of Han Yunxi. Lung Shuang immediately drew her sword and joined the 10 top assassins. The 10 top assassins were dealing with Long Fei Yi, and Lung Shuang's first move was aimed at Han Yunxi. Long Fei Yi was fighting 10 against 1. He couldn't free himself at all. If he wanted to deal with Lung Shuang, he would definitely be distracted. The 10 top assassins were waiting for him to be distracted, who knew that just as Lung Shuang's first move was about to strike, Long Fei Yi suddenly pushed Han Yunxi away, causing her to fall to the ground at the side. Seeing this, Lung Shuang's eyes flashed with gratification. She thought, so what if Long Fei Yi protected Han Yunxi? At the critical moment of life and death, he would still treat this woman like dirt and push her away mercilessly. Lung Shuang only wanted to trap Long Fei Yi and didn't have any intention of hurting him. She immediately retreated from the 10 top assassins and turned to look at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi fell to the ground. Her buttocks were hurting all over. Long Fei Yi's push just now was really forceful. However, she knew that if he didn't use force, she probably wouldn't be able to safely avoid the assassin's blades. However, it was also good that Long Fei Yi pushed her away. He had less of a burden, and she. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi lowered her head and a sly look flashed across her eyes. Lung Shuang coldly looked at Han Yunxi and walked over step by step. Her footsteps were especially heavy. Her long sword dragged on the ground, drawing a long trail. Han Yunxi raised her head to look at her. She revealed a nervous expression and moved back. Her face was timid. What do you want to do? What do you think? Lung Shuang smiled especially elegantly. The Duke of Qin has already pushed me away. You can't use me to threaten him, Han Yunxi hurriedly explained. Lung Shuang laughed coldly. Qin Wangfei, so you still have some self-awareness. Although you can't threaten him, if you ruin this face of yours, won't he never bring you out in the future? Ah! Save me. Don't come over. Han Yunxi screamed and continuously retreated. Long Fei Yi, who was dealing with the top 10 assassins, glanced over from the corner of his eyes. However, he quickly withdrew his gaze. It wasn't clear if he was worried about her or if he was looking down on her. Lung Shuang was already standing high up in front of Han Yunxi. She admired Han Yunxi's cowardice with great interest and slowly raised her long sword. Don't come over. Han Yunxi was so frightened that she covered her face with both hands. It was this action that she activated her hidden weapon. Several golden needles flew out from her wrist without warning. The advantage of close distance made up for the lack of strength and speed of the pear blossom teardrop rain. Even if Lung Shuang was an expert, she couldn't dodge in time. Only when the golden needles sank into her wrist did she realize it. She fell into a trap. Chapter 218. Lung Shuang had admired His Highness Duke of Qin for a long time. Of course, she had investigated Han Yunxi and knew that Han Yunxi knew how to use poison. However, she never thought that Han Yunxi knew how to use hidden weapons. By the time she reacted, it was already too late. Her right hand suddenly lost strength and the long sword fell to the ground with a clang. It was obvious that the hidden weapon was poisoned. However, she was still from a family of assassins. She still had the basic qualities to remain calm in the face of danger. She kicked the long sword and held it in her left hand, continuing to stab at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi, I didn't expect you to be so despicable. Han Yunxi dodged while shooting out needles. She took the opportunity to pull away from Lung Shuang and said sarcastically, "You're 10 against 1. Not only are you despicable, but you're also shameless. Cut the crap. Watch this." A numbing sensation spread from her right hand to her entire body. Lung Shuang didn't know what kind of poison it was, but her conviction as an assassin kept her going. Even if she was poisoned, she had to get rid of Han Yunxi before she collapsed. The tip of the sword changed directions. Every move was cold and ruthless. The blade stabbed past Han Yunxi's face many times. Just a slight deviation and it almost ruined Han Yunxi's face. Han Yunxi secretly admired Lung Shuang's perseverance. She dodged sideways while reminding her, "Fourth young Miss Lung, aren't you curious about what kind of poison you've been poisoned with? Hand over the antidote. Otherwise, I'll make you wish you were dead. Lung Xuangshuang chased after her relentlessly. If she wasn't afraid of Han Yunxi's hidden weapons and was poisoned, she wouldn't have been entangled with this woman for so long. Fourth young Miss Lung, if you don't stop now, you'll be the one suffering a fate worse than death. Not only was Han Yunxi not afraid, she was even laughing. She rolled on the ground and Lung Xuangshuang's sword followed closely behind. She kept stabbing, but she missed by a little each time. But all of a sudden, Han Yunxi stopped and lay on the ground. Lung Xuangshuang was stunned for a moment, but she quickly regained her senses and drew her sword. Who knew that at this critical moment, Han Yunxi suddenly shouted, "You've been poisoned with an aphrodisiac." As soon as he said that, Lung Xuangshuang's movements stopped abruptly. Even the killers and Long Fei Yi who were fighting fiercely around them stopped and looked over. The strange numbness had already spread throughout Lung Xuangshuang's entire body. It was teasing every nerve in Lung Xuangshuang's body. She had been trying very hard to ignore it and not think too much about what kind of poison it was. She only wanted to subdue Han Yunxi. But who knew that Han Yunxi would shout it out so loudly? Now, it was hard for her to ignore it. After all, she was a woman. This man was reaching for a yard after taking an inch. Lung Xuangshuang sucked in a breath of cold air. She simply could not believe her ears. However, Han Yunxi smiled even more happily. This was Long Fei Yi's domineering nature. As long as she did not drag him down, it was fine. He did not need her help at all. Long Fei Yi's whip not only lashed out viciously, but he also deliberately aimed it at the assassins furthest away, forcing them to continue fighting. Duke of Qin, don't be too arrogant. If you want to touch any of the brothers, you have to ask if our 10 swords agree. Fourth young miss, forgive us for not being able to comply. The top 10 assassins and 10 sharp swords surrounded them once again. However, the situation this time was completely different from before. Long Fei Yi used a long whip, not a long sword. Every move, every swing, and every retraction, he quickly gained the upper hand among the 10 assassins. His whip was long and flexible, and the tip of the whip was cold and sharp. With a whoosh, whoosh, whoosh sound, he actually knocked down 2 sharp swords. This time, even Han Yunxi was stunned. Only then did she realize that Long Fei Yi's true ability was actually not swordsmanship, but the whip technique. The golden soft whip hidden at his waist was his most lethal weapon. With his white clothes and golden whip, he moved freely among the 10 assassins. Every swing was luxurious, noble, and domineering. Whether it was Han Yunxi or Lung Xuangshuang, they had never seen a man who could fight a battle so beautifully and luxuriously. Of course, the top 10 assassins were the most shocked. They had already secretly admired Long Fei Yi's swordsmanship, but now they realized that his most powerful skill was not swordsmanship, but something else. This time, it was hard to stop halfway. They had no choice but to bite the bullet and continue fighting. In just a short while, another 2 long swords were knocked down, and the tip of the whip was raised, directly injuring an assassin's face. Han Yunxi was fascinated, but Lung Xuangshuang couldn't stand it anymore. Han Yunxi, where's the antidote? It was Long Fei Yi who didn't want to fight, so she couldn't do anything about it. Han Yunxi stared at Long Fei Yi's figure without blinking and asked casually, "Where's Mother Su?" Long Fei Yi received news that this carriage was supposed to pick up Mother Su. If Lung Xuangshuang was here, then where was Mother Su? Seeing Han Yunxi's indifferent attitude, Lung Xuangshuang was unable to restrain her anger. "I don't know what Mother Su or Mother Li. That person in the palace only told me that if I took this carriage out of the city, the Duke of Qin would chase after me. Han Yunxi, don't go back on your words. Where's the antidote?" No matter how good her willpower was, she couldn't resist the effects of the drug. At this time, she had already unconsciously rolled up her sleeves. She felt so uncomfortable. Han Yunxi wasn't anxious with her. She smiled and said, "When the Duke of Qin is done, I will definitely give you the antidote. Don't worry, the drug won't take effect so quickly." She thought that she wasn't strong enough to be Long Fei Yi's solid backing, but at least she could let him have no worries. You. Lung Xuangshuang was so angry that she almost vomited blood. Han Yunxi, Who do you think I am? My Lung family has always kept their word. Give me the antidote. If I say I won't hurt you, then I won't hurt you. Han Yunshi was in a good mood. She leisurely glanced over. In any case, I don't believe you. Lung Shuang was so angry that she wanted to commit suicide. However, at this time, a squeaking sound similar to that of a mouse suddenly came from the surroundings. Very quickly, from the darkness in all directions, pairs of scarlet eyes appeared. Han Yunshi suddenly stood up. What are those things? The moment she said that, in an instant, countless huge bats flew out from all directions. They ignored everyone else present and actually rushed towards Han Yunshi alone. These beasts were clearly being controlled by someone's mistress to attack her. What kind of person did she offend? Han Yunshi turned to escape, but she didn't dare to run too far. She continuously shot out gold needles to kill the huge bats. However, the number of huge bats was really too big. There were at least a few hundred of them. And her pear blossom teardrop rain could only shoot out 33 gold needles at one time. Of all the martial arts in the world, only speed was invincible. And all kinds of attacks in the world were won by quantity. In just a short while, a few scratches appeared on the back of Han Yunshi's hand. Just when Han Yunshi was overwhelmed by the attacks, Long Fei Yi suddenly lashed out with his whip, sweeping down a large number of huge bats for her. The people of Liberty City also want a share of the loot. Long Fei Yi was as cold as ice. With a flash, he broke through the encirclement of the killers and landed beside Han Yunshi. With a cool wave of his hand, more than half of the huge bats retreated. Although these huge bats were beasts, they also understood human nature. They seemed to have been intimidated by Long Fei Yi's powerful aura. They hovered around the surroundings, not daring to move forward. And right at this time, a man in white clothes flew out from the darkness. He looked elegant and noble, extraordinarily handsome, like a scholar. The huge bats hovered around him. He opened his folding fan, and a huge bat landed gracefully on his folding fan like a butterfly. Such an evil and filthy creature had been trained to be so obedient. This scholar seemed to be a combination of evil and righteousness. This person was none other than the famous eldest young master of Liberty City, Qi Yaotian. Lung Shuang was only one of the candidates for the position of City Lord of the City of Daughters, while Qi Yaotian was the only candidate for the position of City Lord of Liberty City. In the Qi family of Liberty City, he was the most outstanding person. Qi Yaotian glanced at Han Yunshi and chuckled. Your Highness King of Qin, you are mistaken. The City of Daughters is offering a sky-high bounty for your life, while Liberty City is offering a sky-high bounty for the head of the Princess Consort. While speaking, he nodded politely at Lung Shuang, who was standing to the side. Fourth Miss Lung, Liberty City is not stealing your business, is it? Carefree City and the City of Daughters were neck and neck in terms of reputation, but in terms of strength, Carefree City had the upper hand. At the very least, eldest young master Qi Yaotian's strength was enough to raise Long Fei Yi's guard. This time, Liberty City had sent their eldest young master, and the eldest young master had even brought a swarm of huge bats. He must be determined to get Han Yunshi's head. Only God knew how sharp the fangs of this kind of bat were. Long Fei Yi's arm immediately bled. 2 lines of blood flowed non-stop like a faucet that wasn't closed properly. Seeing this, Han Yunshi was shocked. Just as she was about to speak, Lung Shuang finally couldn't take it anymore. She angrily said, Han Yunshi, you stupid woman. Why aren't you giving me the antidote? Do you want to kill Duke of Qin? Of course, Lung Shuang knew that Long Fei Yi wouldn't lower himself to ask for help. She had been waiting for Han Yunshi to speak. Han Yunshi could even threaten her with the antidote. However, Han Yunshi still hadn't made a move. Didn't she know that as a woman, she had to step forward when a man couldn't lower himself? Did she have to lower herself for the man? If this continued, Long Fei Yi would be in danger. Lung Shuang couldn't take it anymore and could only take the initiative to speak up. However, who knew that Han Yunshi would look at her coldly and disdain her suggestion? Instead, She unexpectedly grabbed the large bat that was biting onto Long Fei Yi and pulled it down fiercely. The large bat let go and there were 2 deep wounds on Long Fei Yi's arm. Fresh blood splattered onto her face. Was it painful? Long Fei Yi's brows didn't even crease as his attention was focused on Qi Yaotian's folding fan attack. Han Yunxi knew that he would be in a lot of pain, but she had to do this. Actually, she wasn't idling around. She wasn't cowardly enough to hide in Long Fei Yi's arms and become his burden. She had been looking for opportunities and ways to deal with these large bats. Of course, she wasn't stupid. Earlier when Leng Shuangshuang didn't reply to Qi Yaotian, she knew what Leng Shuangshuang meant. However, not to mention asking for Leng Shuangshuang's help, even if she threatened Leng Shuangshuang to help, she wouldn't be bothered. Earlier, Long Fei Yi's attitude towards the top 10 exponents was very obvious. No matter what method, he didn't need any help and he didn't have any intention to be on good terms with the City of Daughters. Perhaps some women were indeed sensible and knew when to advance and retreat. They would be able to step down for their man at the most appropriate time. Han Yunxi could also be such a woman. However, the man beside her didn't need her to do so. He was the proudest man in the world and the man who wouldn't compromise the most. What she needed to do was to take care of herself. Even if the large bat in her hand struggled fiercely with its bloody mouth wide open and its fangs malevolent, Han Yunxi didn't even blink. 2 poisonous needles accurately pierced into the bat and very soon, the large bat stopped moving. Han Yunxi casually tossed the bat aside and flung it to the ground. Seeing this, Qi Yaotian's movement stiffened. A killer from the City of Daughters couldn't help but exclaim, "That's the Bat King." The Bat King was the leader of this group of large bats. Once the Bat King was killed, based on the habits of the large bats, they would definitely seek revenge. Moreover, they would seek revenge crazily at all costs. Even the controller wouldn't be able to control them anymore. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were in danger. Indeed, as soon as the Bat King landed on the ground, the large bats that were flying chaotically in the air suddenly flapped their wings and stopped. Qi Yaotian immediately retreated far away, a flash of ridicule in his eyes. He was planning to compete with Long Fei Yi for a while longer, but never expected that stupid woman Han Yunxi would actually make a move against the Bat King. How could such a stupid woman be worth such a high price from Tianning's Empress Dowager? How could she be worth Long Fei Yi's protection? Silence reigned around them. Only the fluttering of the bat's wings could be heard. The atmosphere suddenly turned very strange, even more Ning Jing than before a storm. Han Yunxi, you're such an idiotic woman. Someone come, all of you attack together. Leng Shuangshuang couldn't take it anymore. She threw away all of her face and self-respect, even ignoring the heat in her body that was gradually subsiding. She suddenly raised her sword and soared into the air to stand by Long Fei Yi's side. Together with her 10 assassins, she was going to face the revenge of the large bats together with Long Fei Yi. Fourth young Miss Leng, what do you mean by this? Qi Yaotian laughed coldly. That's exactly what I mean. The Duke of Qin is an honored guest of my City of Daughters. Leng Shuangshuang replied icily. Fourth young Miss Leng, you'd better think it over. You can't afford to ruin my carefree city's plans. Qi Yaotian warned Leng Shuangshuang. Although the City of Daughters and Carefree City weren't on good terms, they'd always coexisted peacefully and minded their own business. I've said it before, His Highness Duke of Qin is an honored guest of my City of Daughters. As long as my City of Daughters is here today, no one is allowed to act presumptuously. Leng Shuangshuang was so agitated that she grew bolder and bolder as she spoke. Qi Yaotian retorted with every word, his attitude growing more and more unyielding. However, even though the two of them were speaking, the parties involved, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, didn't even listen to them, let alone take them to heart. Long Fei Yi vigilantly stared at the giant bats that could attack them at any time, while Han Yunxi was completely focused on the dead giant Bat King on the ground, as if she was waiting for something. Leng Shuangshuang spoke agitatedly, but Long Fei Yi didn't say anything for a long time. She thought that if she stood out at this time, Long Fei Yi would at least have a whole new level of respect for her. She couldn't help but look back, only to discover that Long Fei Yi had completely ignored her existence. At this moment, Lung Shuang Shuang felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over her head, extinguishing all her enthusiasm. What exactly should she do for this man to place her in his eyes? What exactly should she do for this man to be willing to be on good terms with City of Daughters? Looking at Long Fei Yi's hand around Han Yunqi's waist, the usually calm Lung Shuang Shuang couldn't control her jealousy for the first time. At this moment, all the bats in the surroundings suddenly flapped their wings violently, and the sound of their wings flapping became noisy all of a sudden. The swarm of giant bats was indeed about to launch a crazy revenge attack. A trace of anticipation flashed past Lung Shuang Shuang's eyes. She was looking forward to letting Long Fei Yi see what kind of woman could be of help to him. Qi Yaotian, who was at the side, was even more impatient to see Long Fei Yi's performance. One had to know that he had raised giant bats for so long, but he had never seen the giant bat's terrifying revenge attack. The sound of flapping wings became louder and louder, and the atmosphere became more and more tense. "Take care of your face," Long Fei Yi said in a low voice as he hugged Han Yunqi even tighter. Han Yunqi could feel his nervousness. However, Han Yunqi wasn't nervous at all. She felt the warmth of his palm on her waist, and a trace of warmth flowed through her heart. "Long Fei Yi, even if you two are only husband and wife in name and only need to use each other, as long as you sincerely protect me at this moment, then I will also sincerely protect you at the same time." Suddenly, a giant bat launched an attack. It retracted its wings and shot towards Han Yunqi like an arrow released from a bow. Han Yunqi's lips curled into a ruthless smile. She shot out a golden needle and accurately shot the leading giant bat backwards, landing on the giant bat king's body. "Ungrateful little bastard," she snorted disdainfully. Hearing this, Qi Yaotian, Lung Shuang Shuang, and even the top 10 assassins were all in disbelief. Lung Shuang Shuang couldn't help but roar, "Han Yunqi, do you still not understand the seriousness of the situation? You ignorant woman. He. I didn't think that Qin Wangfei was such an interesting woman. Wouldn't it be a pity to kill her?" Qi Yaotian also couldn't help but laugh mockingly. A complicated look flashed through Long Fei Yi's eyes. Just as he was feeling suspicious, the countless giant bats floating in the air all retracted their wings and attacked as a group. It was a moment of imminent peril. It was about to start. They were about to attack. Nervous, Qi Yaotian didn't have time to smile as he excitedly held his breath. Lung Shuang Shuang hurriedly pulled out her long sword, and the top 10 assassins immediately followed suit. At this moment, the atmosphere had truly reached its peak. Suddenly, nearly 100 giant bats all gathered together, but Chapter 220. All the giant bats had gathered together. Once they attacked in a frenzy, the consequences would be unimaginable and impossible to guard against. However, just as everyone thought that the vengeful attack was about to begin, the large group of giant bats actually gave up on attacking Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi. They actually swarmed towards the giant bat king's corpse on the ground like crazy. For a moment, everyone was stunned. How could this be? No one was more shocked than Lung Shuang Shuang and Qi Yaotian. Both of them were flabbergasted and couldn't believe what they were seeing with their own eyes. They saw the giant bat king's corpse on the ground. It was unknown whether it was due to the impact of the leading bat or some other reason, but the blood seemed to be flowing out from the pores all over its body. It was extremely terrifying. Of course, everyone only took a glance at this scene because very quickly, the group of giant bats drowned the giant bat king's corpse. The dense mass of bats blocked everyone's line of sight. Why was this happening? Weren't they supposed to attack the culprits, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi? What were they doing? What were they trying to do by surrounding the giant bat king? And what happened to the giant bat king's corpse? Why did it suddenly burst with blood? Qi Yaotian was very unwilling to suspect this, but he couldn't help but suspect that these giant bats were being controlled by someone else. This was simply too unexpected. All sorts of questions made everyone look at Han Yunqi in disbelief. At this moment, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi had already landed on the ground. Of course, Long Fei Yi didn't let go of Han Yunqi. That embrace wasn't just to protect her, it was more like a declaration of ownership. Without asking further, Long Fei Yi also understood that this woman must have used poison. She only knew how to use poison. However, just this poison alone was enough to give him endless surprises and surprises. Although they looked at Han Yunxi in disbelief, whether it was Qi Yaotian or Leng Shuangshuang, they didn't believe that the giant bat's strange behavior had anything to do with Han Yunxi. So what if this woman could use poison? At most, she could poison 1 or 2 giant bats to death. How could she control the giant bats? They'd rather believe that Long Fei had done something behind the scenes. The swarm of bats surrounded the giant Bat King's corpse. They were so dense that it was impossible to see what they were doing. Qi Yaotian didn't dare to act rashly. Judging from their exchange just then, he was very clear that he couldn't do anything to Long Fei without the bat swarm. Leng Shuangshuang didn't bat an eyelid either. She stared fixedly at Han Yunxi, desperate for an answer. It didn't take long for the stench of blood to spread out from within the swarm of bats. At first, it was just 1 or 2, but soon there were more and more of them. Soon, the ground was littered with corpses, and they were all covered in blood, just like King Colossal Bat. Their expressions were gruesome, and it wasn't long before the corpses were all covered in blood. This, Qi Yaotian finally revealed a shocked expression. He had raised giant bats as pets since he was young, so he had a deep understanding of them. However, he couldn't explain this scene. Leng Shuangshuang didn't dare to look any longer, afraid that she would vomit. Soon, nearly 100 giant bats were all dead. The ground was covered in black corpses, and every one of them was dripping with blood. The sight of it made one's scalp tingle. Where the giant Bat King's corpse had been, there was only a pile of bones left. The black bones were gone, and there wasn't even a trace of blood on the ground. Heavens! The giant bat swarm was completely annihilated. Qi Yaotian couldn't help but feel his hair stand on end. He looked at Han Yunxi, but Leng Shuangshuang couldn't move her eyes away. Poison, it must be poison. That was why the black bones appeared. It was this woman's doing. Under the shocked gaze, Han Yunxi was calm and collected. She wanted to walk over, but Long Fei Yi held her tightly. She couldn't help but whisper, "Your Highness, it's fine now. Can you let go?" At her words, Long Fei Yi realized that he'd made a move. He didn't say a word, but immediately released her. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Han Yunxi gracefully walked over and took out a needle to collect the blood from the giant bats. She sniffed lightly, then turned back to smile at Long Fei Yi. "Your Highness, the giant bat poison has been cultivated." She'd never seen giant bats before, but she'd read about them in ancient poison texts. They were a type of raw material used to make poisons. She'd just poisoned the giant Bat King to death and used its blood to attract other giant bats to fight over it. Poison on top of poison, she'd really managed to cultivate giant bat poison. Usually, the poison produced by killing each other in a group was highly toxic. Han Yunxi, Qi Yaotian finally realized how frightening this woman was. He also understood why Tianning's Empress Dowager had offered such a high price for her head. Unfortunately, it was too late. He originally thought that Tianning's Empress Dowager's true target was the Duke of Qin, but now it seemed that this woman was no less frightening than the Duke of Qin himself. Han Yunxi glanced at him and imitated his polite tone. "Eldest young Master Qi, what other instructions do you have to bestow upon me?" Qi Yaotian was momentarily at a loss for words. He didn't know how to reply. The giant bats were his only pets, but now they were all gone. To Long Fei Yi, all of this was within reason, but also beyond his expectations. He was very satisfied and nodded towards Han Yunxi. "Come here then." Han Yunxi was too lazy to pay attention to Qi Yaotian. She hid the needle she'd used to collect the giant bat poison in her wrist and obediently walked back to Long Fei Yi's side. Long Fei Yi immediately wrapped an arm around her waist again. Anyone who saw him would be jealous. Even if there was nothing between them now and there wouldn't be anything between them in the future, she was still someone under his name. He was always this domineering, especially in front of outsiders. Han Yunxi had long gotten used to it. She only knew that there was nothing left for her to do after this. As expected, Long Fei Yi didn't waste words. He suddenly raised his whip and swept it past the blood-stained bodies of the giant bats before swinging it towards Qi Yaotian. Now that the giant bat's poison had been nurtured, it was time for its master to have a taste. Qi Yaotian recovered his wits and immediately dodged out of the way. Long Fei's whip seemed to have eyes of its own as it chased after him, refusing to let him go. Without the giant bats to help him, Qi Yaotian couldn't afford to be arrogant. He was forced into a passive position as he dodged again and again. Several times, he tried to escape, but failed. Of course, if this stalemate continued, he still had the skills to protect himself from Long Fei. But once again, Han Yunxi surprised him. While he was focused on dodging Long Fei's whip, Han Yunxi silently aimed for his neck. "You think you're amazing for raising giant bats as pets? I'll give them back to you." Swoosh, the sharp sound of the whip echoed. Before Qi Yaotian could react, the poison needle had already pierced his neck. He casually wiped it and a pool of black blood appeared. Han Yunxi laughed. "Young Master Qi, the poison produced by the giant bats biting each other is a rare item. I'll give them back to you." Qi Yaotian was greatly alarmed. At this moment, Long Fei's whip ruthlessly swung over. This time, Qi Yaotian didn't dodge and took the full brunt of the whip. He spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. There was a lacerated whip mark on his body and even the blood was black. Long Fei wasn't stupid enough to kill him. After all, killing the young master of Carefree City would cause a lot of trouble. He was busy and didn't want to stir up trouble. The life of this king's woman is priceless. If Carefree City wants to accept another bounty, you might as well try, he warned coldly. Priceless life. Han Yunxi liked this word. As if she was used to his tyranny, she directly ignored the first 5 words. She smiled brilliantly and magnificently. "Young Master Qi, if you want the antidote, come to King Qin's residence in 3 days and buy it. Your life will be at the price of the employer." All the bounties Qi Yaotian had accepted over the years were big ones. It was normal for him to fail. However, he had never been in such a difficult situation. He stood up and took a deep look at Han Yunxi. How many people in the martial arts world knew that Long Fei was good at whips and had amazing martial arts? How many people knew that Han Yunxi was not only good at detoxification, but also that poison could be used as martial arts? He thought that when he returned this time, he had to remind his father to blacklist Han Yunxi and Long Fei in Carefree City and not accept any more bounties easily. Long Fei wouldn't kill him, but the antidote to save his life was still in Han Yunxi's hands. He had no choice but to be polite. He stood up and made a graceful bow with clasped hands. "Farewell, both of you." After saying that, he wanted to leave gracefully. However, after a few steps, he spat out a mouthful of black blood and almost fainted. In the end, he had to be supported by his guards to leave. Seeing this, Han Yunxi could not help but burst into laughter. This was the first time that she had beaten her enemy so badly. It was so beautiful. As it turned out, there were many ways to use poison. She could adapt to the situation at any time. Han Yunxi found that she was getting more and more proficient in the art of poison. Han Yunxi thought that this was the end of the matter. However, Long Fei did not put away his whip. He slowly raised his hand and looked coldly at the top 10 killers of the City of Daughters. At this time, Han Yunxi finally remembered that there were still people from the City of Daughters. Alright, how could she forget about this woman who had scolded her twice for being stupid? The top 10 killers looked at Long Fei's whip that was stained with giant bat's poison and were all frightened. They did not have the courage from before and retreated behind Leng Shuang. Leng Shuang did not know what to say. At this moment, she wished that she could find a hole to hide in. She had scolded Han Yunxi so loudly, but she did not know that she was the one who was truly stupid and ignorant. Had Long Fei long been mocking her in his heart? She had actually argued with him so confidently and even pulled out her sword to help him. It turned out that her wishful thinking was so laughable. What did he want to do when he raised his whip? Leng Shuang was about to speak when Long Fei suddenly swung his whip. He did not hurt anyone. Instead, he swung his whip fiercely in the air as a warning. After that, he turned around and left. He did not even bother to make a move. Lung Shuang was stunned for a long time before she chased after him. Han Yunshi, where's the antidote? She still had the aphrodisiac in her body. Unexpectedly, Han Yunshi turned around and smiled generously. I was lying. That's just a normal poison. It will disappear after a long time. Lung Shuang froze on the spot. She had never been humiliated as much as she had been today in her entire life. Han Yunshi, although I don't want to admit it, I, Lung Shuang, have indeed underestimated you. From now on, I will not underestimate you again. Although Long Fei Yi did not smile, Han Yunshi had a feeling that this guy was in a good mood. He did not let go of her hand, so she could only obediently follow him. She realized that this guy was actually heading in the direction of Medicine City. This is obviously the Empress Dowager's ambush. Aren't you going to look for Mother Su? She asked in a low voice. At the very least, she had to interrogate Lung Shuang about Mother Su's whereabouts. If she said that she did not know, would she really not know? Shuangcheng was nothing. Mother Su was the most important thing. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi said, Tang Li should have succeeded. What did he mean? Chapter 221. Should Tang Li have succeeded? Han Yunshi was surprised as she followed Long Fei Yi back to Medicine City's Wang clan. But even after they left, Lung Shuang was still frozen in place. The 10 assassins exchanged glances, but no one dared to speak. To their left, Ji Yu was leaning lazily against a large tree, the lush foliage covering his body. He didn't care who was chasing after Long Fei Yi. All he wanted was for the various factions of Cloud Realm continent to join forces and wipe out the Duke of Qin's estate. He only cared about Han Yunshi. That poison needle had clearly come from the Tang clan, and the giant bat's poison wasn't simple at all. Just what had Han Yunshi done to the giant Bat King in such a short time to cause internal strife? Ji Yu waited until Lung Shuang and the rest had left before flying down to carefully examine the giant Bat King. Unbeknownst to him, someone was still lurking on the right side of the forest, watching everything. This person was none other than the head of Tianing's Imperial Physician Courtyard, Ji Yu Beiyu. His attention seemed to be focused on the giant bat corpses as well. When he saw Ji Yu looting all of the giant bat corpses, a complicated look flashed through Ji Yu Beiyu's eyes. Then he turned around and vanished into thin air. Even top experts would be flabbergasted at such speed. This man had hidden his strength well. By the time Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi arrived at Medicine City's Wang clan, it was already daybreak. As for Mama Su, she had long been kidnapped by Tang Li and brought to the Wang clan. Han Yunshi realized in hindsight that the Empress Dowager had indeed found Mama Su at Medicine City's Mu estate. She'd purposely released news to test Long Fei Yi while offering bounties to the City of Daughters and Carefree City to surround and attack Long Fei Yi. On the other hand, she'd sent a group of palace experts to secretly pick up Mama Su. But as it turned out, Long Fei Yi played along and distracted the people of the City of Daughters and Liberty City so that Tang Li could kidnap Mother Su easily. In fact, before the people of the City of Daughters and Liberty City retreated, Tang Li had already kidnapped Mother Su very smoothly. It had to be said that when she saw Tang Li standing in the garden in his snow-white clothes from afar, Han Yunshi once again had a beautiful illusion. However, when he opened his mouth, all the beautiful thoughts were destroyed. A long time later, Han Yunshi told Tang Li that every time she saw him, she wanted to poison him to make him mute. Tang Li broke out in a cold sweat. As soon as Long Fei Yi walked over, Tang Li immediately claimed credit. I didn't use any hidden weapons. I killed all of them with my bare hands, leaving only one alive to report back to the Empress Dowager. I think the Empress Dowager will be so angry that she won't be able to sleep for a few nights. Where is she? Long Fei Yi asked. Han Yunshi's eyes lit up. Tang Li didn't kill Mother Su immediately because he wanted to wait for Long Fei Yi to come back and interrogate her. Could it be that she could use this opportunity to find out more about his background? She didn't want to know so much at first, but this fellow had already told her about the Tang clan. It'd be too fake if she wasn't curious. If this fellow's mother was a member of the Tang clan, then who was his father? The women of the Tang clan didn't marry outside the clan, so why was Long Fei Yi brought to the palace as soon as he was born? He wasn't someone who coveted glory, wealth, power, and status. Why did he continue to stay in Tianning's imperial clan? I was bored waiting for you guys, so I forced a confession out of her. That, before Tang Li could finish, Wang Gong cut in unhappily from the side. She was accidentally forced to death. Long Fei Yi's gaze turned cold at these words. His gaze shot towards Tang Li like an arrow. Tang Li immediately raised his hand and swore, "I found out before she died. Mother Su never told anyone about this. Those palace experts secretly kidnapped her. The Mu clan didn't know anything either, so she can die." Can die? Han Yunxi's head was full of black lines. If this fellow wasn't the young head of the Tang clan and Long Fei Yi's close friend, she would definitely doubt his reliability. Seeing Long Fei Yi's cold expression, Tang Li quickly smiled apologetically and added, "The body's already been cleaned up. Don't worry. Duke of Qin, although the Empress Dowager didn't have any evidence, but the truth was revealed in the end," Wang Gong said sincerely. Mother Su's death didn't mean everything was over. It only meant that the Empress Dowager and Emperor Tianhui couldn't touch Long Fei Yi for now. Still, Long Fei Yi's origins had aroused their suspicions. Emperor Tianhui had always been on guard against Long Fei Yi. Now that his suspicions had arisen, it was impossible for Emperor Tianhui to tolerate his unscrupulous ways of eliminating dissidents. He'd rather kill the wrong person than kill the wrong person. He'd never give Long Fei Yi a chance to rest. In other words, Mother Su's death wasn't the end, but the beginning of a reign of blood. Long Fei Yi gave Wang Gong a meaningful look. Without a word, he walked towards the depths of the flower gardens. Wang Gong and Tang Li immediately followed. Han Yunxi hesitated a bit before following as well. She had many questions, but they all came to one conclusion: Long Fei Yi's ambitions. Emperor Tianhui wanted to protect Tianning's throne and country, but did Long Fei Yi want these things, or more? It was impossible to estimate the breadth of this man's heart. Han Yunxi stared at his cold and lonely back. For the first time, she felt a strong desire to know more about him. When they reached the pavilion, there were only 3 seats at the stone table. All 3 of them sat down, leaving Han Yunxi forgotten on one side. Long Fei Yi seemed to only notice her presence now. He glanced at her before rising to his feet and speaking to Wang Gong. What's bound to come, can't be avoided. He didn't intend to elaborate after that, but had Wang Gong arrange a carriage so they could return to the capital. Did he stop talking because she was here? Han Yunxi's eyes flashed with disappointment, but she remained silent. It wasn't until they bid farewell to Tang Li and Wang Gong and boarded the carriage that she spoke up. "Lady Tianxin, how much have you found out?" Long Fei Yi didn't expect Han Yunxi to ask such a question. "What do you mean?" "I also want to know my mother's origins, as well as her relationship with Medicine City. I also want to know." Han Yunxi hesitated before she continued. "I also want to know who my birth father is." She really couldn't see through this man. He told her about the Tang clan, but was also on guard against her knowing more. He'd nurtured her and given her assassination weapons, but sometimes drew a clear line between them. If her birth was the reason for his unease, then she didn't mind telling him everything to dispel his doubts. Not to mention that she only liked him a little. Even if she liked him a lot, she still had her own principles and wouldn't lose herself. She was very clear about her situation. Her status as Qin Wangfei meant that she had to hug this man's thigh in order to survive peacefully in the capital. She hoped that they could trust each other and treat each other honestly. She could help him a lot, and perhaps he could also uncover Lady Tianxin's secret. Long Fei Yi looked at her with a complicated gaze. He had already interrogated Han Konggan, so of course he knew about Han Yunxi's birth. What he was surprised about was this woman's attitude. This wasn't a woman who would be swayed by emotions or led by the nose. "What are you looking at? You already knew that I wasn't Han Konggan's biological daughter, didn't you?" Han Yunxi asked openly. "So?" Long Fei Yi still didn't bat an eyelid. So I'll make it clear to you today. If you think that I'm useful, please don't doubt me or be on guard against me. I've said it before, you're my boat. I have no need to trick you. If you have the slightest bit of doubt, please don't disturb me in the future. I'll pretend that I didn't hear anything that I heard before. I'll know my place and be a respectable Qin Wangfei. I'll guard the Duke of Qin's manor and only be responsible for not embarrassing you. Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi without blinking as she spoke very seriously. Actually, when she moved out of Hibiscus Courtyard that day, she had wanted to say these words to him. It had nothing to do with love or romance. It had to do with her position and even her fate. Long Fei Yi's complicated gaze deepened. He also looked at Han Yunxi, but didn't reply for a long time. Han Yunxi also didn't say much and waited. Time slowly passed between the two of them in silence until the carriage stopped in front of the Duke of Qin's manor. The carriage driver had already set up the footstool, but unfortunately, neither Long Fei Yi nor Han Yunxi had any intention of dismounting. After a long time, Long Fei Yi finally opened his mouth. His voice was cold and even contained a hint of warning. Quickly understand the perplexing butterfly illusion. This prince's other matters have nothing to do with you. He rejected her. In the end, he still had to be on guard against her. Her heart couldn't help but tighten, but Han Yunxi still maintained her calm. She said seriously, so in the future, I'll have to trouble your highness to not let me know so much. This concubine's heart is small and timid. This concubine can't tolerate so many secrets. Keep your courage and heart in check. You don't know much. Long Fei Yi heartlessly stated the truth. She really didn't know much. Han Yunxi's heart felt stifled. In the end, she couldn't say anything in response. She could only watch as Long Fei Yi got off the carriage. Just like that, Han Yunxi was disappointed. Her self-confident and proud self even began to wonder if she'd thought too highly of herself. Han Yunxi didn't bring up the matter again. As for the perplexing butterfly illusion, she still couldn't figure out its toxicity, so she couldn't store it in her detox system. For now, she could only keep it to herself. After returning to the estate, Han Yunxi only told Grand Concubine Yi that Mama Su had died and told her not to worry. She didn't explain too much, and the palace was calm and peaceful. Over the past few days, Han Yunxi was in a gloomy mood. She was easily angered and explosive, but the people of Carefree City just had to come knocking on her door. They wanted the antidote at a high price, but Han Yunxi went back on her word and demanded 3 times the price for the antidote. She had no idea that her gloominess had thoroughly offended the people of Carefree City. Qi Yaotian personally swore that he'd make Han Yunxi spit out 3 times the price one day. The calm days only lasted for a few days. Soon enough, Han Yunxi heard that there was a transfer of personnel in the imperial court. All of the civil and military officials were in a state of panic. Without a doubt, Emperor Tianhui had made a move against Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi didn't meddle in the affairs of the imperial court, but he had plenty of people in the court. His influence was considerable, so Emperor Tianhui couldn't do anything to him. Naturally, he'd make a move against the people around him. Among them, the most unexpected was the young general Mu Qingwu. Nobody knew whether Mu Qingwu was one of Long Fei Yi's men, but everyone knew that Mu Qingwu was one of the crown prince's archenemy, the second imperial prince. He'd always been hated by the crown prince's faction. Emperor Tianhui's move against him this time proved that even if he wasn't one of Long Fei Yi's men, he still held an important position in the game of power. Rather than an important position, it was more accurate to say that he held an important position in the military. Emperor Tianhui ordered Mu Qingwu to gather 300,000 taels of pay and provisions for the troops and 200,000 dan of grain within half a year. Otherwise, he'd be demoted and investigated. 300,000 taels of pay and provisions was a matter of money, but 200,000 dan of grain was a problem that even money couldn't solve. When Han Yunxi heard the news, she felt that Mu Qingwu had gotten shot even when he was lying down. Unexpectedly, she was in trouble as well. This trouble was Chapter 222. Han Yunxi never would have thought that her problem would be the crown prince, Long Tianmo. Long Tianmo's old illness had flared up. In the middle of the night, she was sleeping soundly. She was so shocked by this news that she almost fell to the ground. After calming down, she asked many questions, but eunuch Luo who came to invite her didn't say anything. He only said that the crown prince's old illness had flared up and the emperor was furious, urgently summoning her to the palace. Han Yunxi immediately smelled the scent of a conspiracy. Long Tianmo's old illness was a strange fetus in fetus. This illness was different from other illnesses. Once the surgery was successful, it would not flare up again. Moreover, she had already expelled all the poison from Long Tianmo's body, so there would not be any side effects. Han Yunxi knew that it would not be easy to come out of the palace this time. If it was anyone else that was poisoned, she could just say that she didn't understand and refuse. She did not receive a salary from the Imperial Doctor's Hospital, so she had no obligation to treat anyone. However, Long Tianmo's illness was something that she had personally overturned Han Konggen's diagnosis and cured, so she had no choice but to face it. It was not easy to peacefully live in a corner. Actually, ever since she was betrothed to Long Fei Yi, she was destined to be restless. All right, since trouble had come knocking on her door, she'd go take a look. She wanted to see what kind of side effects Long Tianmo had developed out of the blue. When she was about to leave, Zhao Mama quickly stopped her and asked in a low voice, "Princess Consort, His Highness did not come back tonight. Should I send someone to inform him?" Han Yunxi hesitated a bit before refusing, "No need." Zhao Mama wanted to persuade her, but Han Yunxi had already left. "There's no time to lose, let's go." Han Yunxi did not refuse and calmly got into the carriage to urge eunuch Luo to set off. Upon arriving at the Eastern Palace, the first person Han Yunxi saw was none other than Imperial Physician Jiyu Beiyu. Han Yunxi had hidden the truth about Long Tianmo's illness from the rest of the world. Only Jiyu Beiyu knew about it, and Jiyu Beiyu had been the one to assist her during her treatment. Jiyu Beiyu should know that there was no such thing as an old ailment under these circumstances. In other words, she hadn't left any clues for Emperor Tianhui to pick up on. But Jiyu Beiyue's expression was very unsightly. He was about to speak when Emperor Tianhui walked out from the inner rooms. Emperor Tianhui was dignified and cold, lofty and aloof. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's as he stared at Han Yunxi as if she was his prey. Han Yunxi had seen those eyes before when she'd threatened him to save Long Fei Yi. She'd be lying if she said she wasn't afraid. That time had been a fluke during the plague. Han Yunxi was very clear that she didn't have the right to threaten Emperor Tianhui. After all, even Long Fei Yi had to deal with him step by step. Of course, being afraid didn't mean she'd submit. She bowed gracefully and bowed her head in greeting. 10,000 blessings to your majesty." Emperor Tianhui scrutinized Han Yunxi cold, not allowing her to rise. Back then, he'd only wanted to use this woman to humiliate Long Fei Yi, but never expected a woman like her to stir up wave after wave and ruin his plans again and again. Emperor Tianhui didn't speak for a while. Han Yunxi bowed, her back aching terribly. She was about to speak up when Jiyu Beiyu beat her to it. "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince's illness is more important." Emperor Tianhui had always trusted Jiyu Beiyu, but his attitude had changed ever since Jiyu Beiyu came to the Han family clinic. He gave Jiyu Beiyu a meaningful look before saying cold, "Imperial Physician Jiyu, do you remember the consequences of Han Konggen's misdiagnosis?" "Your Majesty, it's still debatable whether esteemed Wang Fei made a misdiagnosis. His Highness's illness." Before Jiyu Beiyu could finish, a sharp and arbitrary voice came from the inner rooms. "It's a misdiagnosis. Imperial Physician Jiyu, you're the head of the Imperial Physician Courtyard, but you can't even see such an illness. If your grandfather's spirit is in heaven, he'll be grieving and hating. Didn't they say an old illness flared up? Now it's a misdiagnosis. Who came to the conclusion?" Han Yunxi looked towards the source of the voice and saw an old man slowly walk out. He looked to be around 70 years of age, with white hair and a ruddy complexion. He had a long white beard, and his gait was dignified. He was even more spirited than a young man. Most old men like this would have the air of an immortal, but this one exuded an air of arrogance that was hard to ignore. If not for Emperor Tianhui's presence and his imperial aura, his aura would be even stronger. Who else dared to speak so loudly in this place? Director Shi, His Highness Crown Prince's illness still hasn't been determined. If you speak like this, it's rather lacking in the rigor of a doctor. Jiyu Beiyue's tone was flat, but it carried an air of authority. Director Shi? Han Yunshi was stunned. The director of Medical City's Medical Academy, Shi Yubo, who lived in Western Ju for a long time. She never expected it to be him. Of the Medical Academy's directors, the youngest was Han Konggan, while the oldest was Shi Yubo. Lady Tianxin must have helped Han Konggan quite a bit to become a director of the Medical Academy. In terms of medical skills, Shi Yubo was enough to throw Han Konggan off the road. Although they were both directors, Han Konggan was only a divine doctor, while Shi Yubo was a primogenitor of medicine. The title of director wasn't a symbol of medical skills, but of one's status. Director, Council of Elders, Vice Academy Head, and Academy Head were the four major administrative ranks that held a certain amount of power in the medical academy. They were part of the management. The true symbol of medical skills was their medical ranks. There were 9 ranks in total: medical apprentice, medical scholar, grand medical scholar, divine doctor, primogenitor, sage doctor, immortal doctor, and sovereign doctor. Jiyu Beiyue's grandfather was a primogenitor of medicine. Of the current 10 directors of the medical academy, most were divine doctors. Only 2 of them were primogenitors of medicine. They had created their own schools of medical skills and were allowed to take in disciples independently. Shi Yubo was one of them. Although he was only a director, this old man was a 6th-ranked doctor. He held a pivotal position in the medical community, so it was no wonder he'd been so confident in his words. No wonder Jiyu Beiyue's expression had been so ugly just then. Heaven knows how Emperor Tianhui had managed to invite such an important figure, but Han Yunshi didn't care about that. She only wanted to know what basis director she had to say she'd made a mistake in her diagnosis. Han Yunshi might be bowed, but her aura wasn't weak. She stared straight at Director Shi and warned, "Director Shi, you should think it over clearly. Framing this Wang Fei is a very serious crime." As soon as these words came out, Shi Lisha, who had always thought of himself as superior, sucked in a breath of cold air. What an arrogant woman. Come with this old man will make you convince. Han Yunshi didn't move, but looked towards Emperor Tianhui. Rise. Emperor Tianhui reluctantly allowed her to rise. Thanks to your majesty. Han Yunshi didn't lose any of her poise as she rose to her feet. Only then did she follow Director Shi into the inner rooms, with Emperor Tianhui and Jiyu Beiyue following closely behind. But as soon as they entered the room, Han Yunshi saw that Long Tianmo was already unconscious on the bed. He was only wearing a white brocade robe, and his stomach was clearly bulging. So this was a relapse of his old ailment. That's impossible. Although they didn't have modern B-scan ultrasound technology, judging from the results of the fetus in fetus poisoning and the results of the excreted blood, Han Yunshi was willing to bet on her life that Long Tianmo's ailment was a fetus in fetus. It was impossible for it to relapse. Even if she took 10,000 steps back and assumed that there was a second fetus in his body that hadn't been discovered yet, it couldn't have grown so suddenly in such a short time. Someone must have done something to his stomach. Han Yunshi, you said it was a malignant tumor in the past. Once the tumor was removed, all the toxins would be gone. How do you explain this now? Emperor Tianhui asked coldly. Han Yunshi didn't answer, but stepped forward to take his pulse. At the same time, she activated the detox system, which didn't give her any notifications. But the pulse was exactly the same as before, a slippery one. A pregnancy pulse was a type of slippery pulse, which was why Han Konggan had diagnosed it as a pregnancy pulse, but Han Yunshi had concealed the truth and said it was poison. Then what about now? What did Director Shi say? Han Yunshi didn't rush to ask, but pressed down on Long Tianmo's stomach instead. She was so startled that she almost withdrew her hand. Heavens, the condition of his stomach was exactly the same as before. It was extremely similar to a pregnancy. After the examination, Han Yunqi looked suspiciously towards Jiyu Beiyu. Jiyu Beiyu furrowed his brows, his face full of worry as he reminded her that this wasn't an easy matter to deal with. It was obvious that someone had done something to the stomach, but they couldn't figure out what had happened. Director Shi, what's your diagnosis? Han Yunqi finally spoke. What, are you admitting that you made a mistake? Director Shi asked disdainfully. Even if His Highness Crown Prince's current condition is the same as before, it doesn't mean anything. There are many diseases with similar symptoms. I'm sure Director Shi knows better than I do. It's very possible that the Crown Prince is suffering from another disease. Han Yunqi refused to budge an inch. Another illness? Then tell me, what illness is it this time? Director Shi refused to let the matter go. I'm not sure yet, but it's definitely not the same cause as before. Han Yunqi was resolute. Of course it's not the same cause as before. Your previous diagnosis was wrong. Director Shi denied it outright. Qin Wangfei, listen well. The Crown Prince's illness is called ascites. Ascites? Han Yunqi almost spat out her saliva at those words. Actually, when she first heard that the Crown Prince's stomach was big, her first thought was that it was this illness. However, she rejected that thought when she took his pulse. This was a professional term. In layman's terms, it was a pathological accumulation of fluid in the body. The amount of fluid in the abdomen exceeded the normal value. There was a small amount of fluid in the abdomen that flowed out to lubricate the intestines. Under pathological conditions, the amount of fluid in the abdomen increased. When it exceeded 200 milliliters, it was called ascites. Ascites wasn't a primary disease. It was caused by other diseases in the body. Although Han Yunqi was a poison doctor, she worked in the hospital all year round and had seen many diseases. She had seen a child who was a few years old. He was all skin and bones, but his stomach was bigger than a pregnant woman's. She understood this illness. She believed that Jiyu Beiyu understood it even more. There was no reason for them not to be able to diagnose it. Judging from Long Tianmo's pulse, it didn't have anything to do with ascites. Besides, if it really was ascites, then it was impossible for his stomach to suddenly become so big in such a short period of time. A month ago, hadn't Long Tianmo been hosting the spring hunt and was doing well? Judging from his pulse and the time of his illness's onset, it's not ascites. Han Yunqi refuted on the spot. At this time, Jiyu Beiyu also spoke up. Director Shi, let's not talk about the present. Let's talk about the past. The Crown Prince was bedridden for 7 years. If it was ascites, how could he not become thin? How could he survive 7 years? Chapter 223. Once a person had ascites, they'd lose weight. Moreover, most ascites were caused by malignant diseases. How could Long Tianmo have endured for 7 years? Director Shi's diagnosis was full of doubtful points. In fact, it was completely baseless. But when faced with Han Yunqi and Jiyu Beiyu's questions, Director Shi dismissed them with a single sentence. He said self-righteously, "You're talking about common ascites, but His Highness Crown Prince is suffering from a rare chronic form of ascites. The disease flares up slowly, similar to pregnancy. It was because of Qin Wangfei's misdiagnosis and careless use of poisons that caused the disease to flare up so suddenly. If old man hadn't arrived in time, His Highness Crown Prince's life would have been over." Director Shi's words were so convincing that they made it sound as if it were true. Han Yunqi couldn't help but laugh coldly. She'd heard that ascites was divided into 3 types, leaky, exudative, and bloody, but this was her first time hearing about chronic ascites. This fellow was a medical primogenitor, so he could create his own school of thought. What a bunch of nonsense. Who knew what he'd done to Long Tianmo's body when Emperor Tianhui invited him here? That's why his abdomen was swollen and his pulse was slippery. A few days ago, when Emperor Tianhui made a move against young General Mu Qingwu, Han Yunqi assumed that he was seizing the chance to suppress the second imperial son's arrogance and push the crown prince down. Who knew that Emperor Tianhui was willing to use the crown prince to get rid of her? If Mu Qingwu couldn't gather enough provisions within half a year, his military authority would be revoked. The second imperial son would have lost half an arm, while the crown prince's mishap would have created a stalemate between the two factions in court. In the end, Emperor Tianhui would be the one to gain the most. This old fox was killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Han Yunxi was about to explain herself when Emperor Tianhui suddenly issued a cold order. Han Yunxi's medical skills aren't good enough. She swindled and almost caused the crown prince to lose his life. Someone come, lock her up in the prisons. As soon as he spoke, 2 imperial guards rushed in to detain Han Yunxi. I'm not convinced. Today, Han Yunxi finally understood what it meant to have power over justice, and what it meant to have the emperor above the sky in the world of imperial power. Your Majesty, I'm not convinced. Director, she doesn't have any evidence. He's wrongly accusing me, Han Yunxi angrily said. Emperor Tianhui didn't allow her to explain. Director, she is a director of the medical academy and a 6th-rank primogeniture doctor. How could he make a mistake? Han Yunxi, if you still refuse to admit your mistakes, we will definitely not let you off easily. Men, take her away immediately. Han Yunxi gave a cold laugh. She didn't make any more futile attempts to explain herself, but her lips curved into a mocking smile as she narrowed her eyes at Director Shi. Her eyes were clear and bright, as if they could see through everything. A 6th-grade medical grandmaster. Do the elders of the medical academy know that you are so capable? She left behind these words before the imperial guards took her away. Director Shi's face was ghastly white. Without a doubt, Han Yunxi's words were a warning to him. Emperor Tianhui might be able to protect him in Tianning, but the medical academy wasn't a place where Emperor Tianhui's words counted. He couldn't let the medical academy know about this. Jiyu Beiyu allowed Han Yunxi to be taken away without saying a word. He had long predicted this would happen before Han Yunxi entered the palace. All he wanted to know was Director Shi's diagnosis. In the silence of the room, Director Shi finally looked towards Jiyu Beiyu. I heard that Imperial Physician Jiyu approved of your previous diagnosis as well? Nonsense. Nonsense. If he didn't approve, why would he have argued with Han Yunxi just then? Director Shi's question was giving Jiyu Beiyu some leeway to argue. At his words, Emperor Tianhui looked over as well. He knew that Director Shi had been trying to rope in Jiyu Beiyu all this time. Jiyu Beiyu was still young, but his medical skills had long reached the level of a 5th-rank divine doctor. His future prospects were immeasurable. Add that to Grandfather Gu's connections and his current position as head of the academy, and it wouldn't be difficult for him to apply for a director position in the medical academy. Moreover, Grandfather Jiyu was a 6th-rank primogeniture doctor as well. When he was a director, he'd been kind to others and made friends with many people. He had a high reputation and earned the respect of many of his peers. Amongst the directors, he was a spiritual leader. If Grandfather Jiyu hadn't passed away, he might have entered the Council of Elders by now. In this line of work, reputation and seniority were important. Even after Grandfather Gu's death, many people would still give Jiyu Beiyu face and take care of him. This was also why Emperor Tianhui placed Jiyu Beiyu in an important position and didn't make a move against Jiyu Beiyu after the Han family's free clinic. Roping in Jiyu Beiyu would be a great help to Director Shi when he entered the Council of Elders in the future. But Jiyu Beiyu refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. He didn't explain himself, but simply nodded. Yes. Moreover, this junior still agrees with esteemed Wang Fei's diagnosis. Director Shi was caught off guard. His old face fell as he approached Jiyu Beiyu and said in a low voice, Imperial Physician Jiyu, a wise man submits to circumstances. Your grandfather has already passed away a long time ago. You have nothing to do with the medical academy now. In other words, Director Shi admits to framing esteemed Wang Fei and has a guilty conscience. Are you afraid that the medical academy will pursue the matter? Jiyu Beiyu retorted seriously. He looked like a frail, gentle, and modest gentleman, But Jiyu Beiyu never gave anyone face when it was time to be blunt. Director, she had not only been rejected, but humiliated as well. A lofty man like him had always been respected and flattered by his juniors, so he'd never suffered such humiliation. His face alternated between red and white, but he couldn't speak. Emperor Tianhui didn't expect Jiyu Beiyu to be so insistent. After all, Jiyu Beiyu had been in the imperial physician courtyard for many years and had seen all sorts of infighting in the imperial harem. He'd faced plenty of temptations and roped in as well. He'd always been a loner, unmoved by anyone or anything. But now he was helping Han Yunshi because he had his heart set on the Duke of Qin. Or had Han Yunshi used some sort of bewitching spell on him? No matter what, Emperor Tianhui wasn't planning to keep him around any longer after what he'd said today. Someone come, Imperial Physician Ji Yu neglected his duties and aided the tyrant in his tyranny. He knows his wrongs and refuses to mend them. Throw him into the prisons as well. Han Yunshi retorted a few more times, but Imperial Physician Ji Yu didn't even say a single word of injustice. He only gave the unconscious Long Tianmo a pitying look before allowing the Imperial guards to escort him out. Director, she watched Jiyu Beiyue's retreating form with a sigh despite his anger. Such a young man, what a waste. The medical academy. Emperor Tianhui trailed off. He was more concerned about that. Your Majesty, don't worry. His Highness Crown Prince's illness can't be cured by anyone besides this old official. Even if the Council of Elders came, they wouldn't have the right to speak. Director, she wouldn't have dared to do such a thing for Emperor Tianhui if he didn't have some skills. Emperor Tianhui nodded his head in satisfaction. But as soon as he left the Eastern Palace, he ran into the Empress Dowager, who'd hurried over after hearing the news. This meant that news of Han Yunshi and Jiyu Beiyue's imprisonment had spread very quickly. The Empress Dowager was still brooding over Mama Su's death. Emperor Tianhui had told her to rest and recuperate, but she'd only rested for a few days before something happened to her most treasured grandson. Changping had already passed away, so they'd lost a perfect marriage alliance. Meanwhile, the Empress's health was fluctuating. Now she only had the Crown Prince left. Although the other imperial sons were her own grandchildren, the Crown Prince was still born of the Empress and the future of the imperial uncle's estate. Once he lost power, the imperial uncle's estate would fall. Your Majesty, just what happened? Mo was perfectly fine, so why did his illness suddenly act up again? The Empress Dowager asked. His old illness acted up again. Fortunately, Director, she was here, or else the consequences would have been unthinkable. Emperor Tianhui sighed with emotion. He wasn't telling the truth to his own mother. 20 years ago, this mother had wholeheartedly helped him fight for the throne, but now her heart was all on the Crown Prince. The heartless nature of the imperial family included husband and wife. Only the newlyweds laughed in the imperial harem, but not the old. Brothers and sisters were heartless as well. Countless brothers and sisters fought and killed each other. Parents were even more heartless as well. Father and son, mother and son, would fight for their own interests one day. Although Emperor Tianhui had made Long Tianmo the Crown Prince and spent countless efforts to nurture him, Long Tianmo could change. Times were changing as well. Emperor Tianhui wasn't even 50 years old yet, so he had his own plans. Isn't it a malignant tumor? Wouldn't everything be fine once the poison was treated? Why did it act up again? The Empress Dowager asked. If she couldn't sniff out the fishy details, then she'd be Emperor Tianhui's mother in vain. It really was a misdiagnosis. If Muhu doesn't believe me, then go take a look for yourself. Jin still has urgent business to attend to, so I won't accompany Muhu, Emperor Tianhui said respectfully. The Empress Dowager was an intelligent woman. A complicated look flickered past her eyes before she stopped doubting him. Then can Director Shi cure Tianmo? It'll take some time. Muhu doesn't need to worry. Emperor Tianhui's words were a heart-strengthening drug for the Empress Dowager. She nodded and said, Emperor, you can go busy yourself. I'll go take a look at that pitiful child. Naturally, the news spread out of the palace and caused an uproar as soon as daybreak. This wasn't the first time Han Yunshi had been imprisoned, But the fact that she'd been imprisoned for the sake of the crown prince wasn't the first time she'd been imprisoned. Even an idiot could tell that things were serious this time. At the Duke of Qin's estate, Zhao Mimar had ignored Han Yunxi's orders to search for His Highness Duke of Qin after she left last night. Unfortunately, she couldn't find him. Currently, Long Fei Yi was at the solitary enclosure, so he knew the situation like the back of his hand. Tang Li was sitting by his side, looking over with a teasing smile. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, you've dragged esteemed Wang Fei down so badly. Why aren't you thinking of ways to save her?" After witnessing Han Yunxi's abilities and courage, Tang Li quite liked her. But that woman's identity was still unknown. Long Fei Yi had been investigating Han Yunxi for a while now, but he couldn't do anything about it. He'd tried multiple times to ask him about Han Yunxi's origins, but this fellow always avoided the question. Thus, Tang Li could only keep his distance from her. Director, she insisted that it was a misdiagnosis, so the only people who could save her now were the medical academy's people. Long Fei Yi didn't have any connections in the medical academy, but he had people in Medicine City. Medicine City was medicine. Without medicine, there was nothing to be done. Without medicine, medicine was a pile of trash. Medicine City and Medical City had always been close family. On one side, Chu Shifeng had been waiting for His Highness Duke of Qin's orders as well. But Long Fei Yi wasn't in a rush. Instead, he said meaningfully, "Your lordship would like to see just how capable Jiyu Beiyu is." At these words, Chu Shifeng and Tang Li exchanged glances with tacit understanding. Neither of them said a word. Long Fei Yi wasn't in a rush to save her, but he made a high-profile appearance at the Justice Court's prisons that very afternoon to visit them. Chapter 224. When had His Highness Duke of Qin ever visited the Justice Courts, much less visited anyone in prison? News of Qin Wangfei's imprisonment had already spread like wildfire. The Crown Prince was still under treatment and the Emperor had yet to convict anyone, so everyone was more interested in the Duke of Qin's movements. But who knew that he'd come directly to the prisons without even entering the palace? Official Ouyang of the Justice Courts was naturally one of Emperor Tianhui's men, but he didn't dare to slight His Highness Duke of Qin. With His Highness Duke of Qin's schemes and methods, he could easily remove his official hat at any time. Between Emperor Tianhui and His Highness Duke of Qin, even a third-rank official like him had to tread carefully as if he were treading on thin ice. Originally, Han Yunxi and Jiyu Beiyu had been separated into different prison cells and treated like normal prisoners. Official Ouyang had even prepared a torture chamber for them to await Emperor Tianhui's orders. As soon as he heard His Highness Duke of Qin's arrival, official Ouyang arranged for them to be placed in clean and comfortable cells in the prisons. Each of them had their own cell separated by an iron gate and treated with the highest standards. As for why Long Fei was visiting the prisons in a high-profile manner, that was because he'd ordered someone to report his intentions before he even arrived at the Justice Courts. This meant that the Justice Courts had to formally receive him. A carriage bearing the Duke of Qin's insignia stopped in front of the Justice Court's main gates. Long Fei Yi was dressed in fine robes as he stepped off the carriage on the back of a servant. He was handsome and aloof, noble and inviolable. All of the doors of the Justice Courts were wide open. Official Ouyang and all of the officials knelt at the foot of the steps to welcome him. It was a spectacular sight, so it was hard for the entire capital not to know that the Duke of Qin had come to visit. How was this a prison visit? Those who didn't know better might even think that His Highness Duke of Qin had come to inspect the Justice Court. But Long Fei Yi didn't place any importance on their respect. He walked past official Ouyang and said cold, "Still not leading the way?" "Yes, yes." Official Ouyang hurriedly got up and personally led the way. This was his first time seeing His Highness Duke of Qin up close, but he was so intimidated by his cold and solemn aura that he didn't even dare to raise his head. Long Fei Yi did not ask anything along the way and went straight to the prison. Unfortunately, he bumped into Han Yunxi from afar. She was leaning against the iron gate and whispering to Jiyu Beiyu. The two of them were whispering to each other intimately. He stopped abruptly and watched without batting an eyelid. Even His Highness Duke of Qin would get jealous? Did this man, who made countless women go crazy, need to be jealous? Lord Ouyang and the rest who were following by the side didn't know what was going on and didn't dare to make a sound. Lord Ouyang mustered up his courage and carefully raised his head. When he glanced at Long Fei Yi, he immediately broke out in cold sweat and didn't dare to raise his head again. Heaven knows what a frosty face it was. Lord Ouyang began to doubt whether his arrangement of the prison cells was right or wrong. Amidst the silence, the air grew tense. It wasn't until Han Yunxi inadvertently turned her head and saw them that everyone let out a sigh of relief. It was as if something big would have happened if she hadn't looked over. Han Yunxi hadn't expected this. She'd only entered at dawn, but Long Fei Yi had arrived in just half a day. She knew that even if Zhao Mema didn't say anything, this guy would quickly find out about this matter. She just hadn't expected him to come here. She had just been discussing this matter with Jiyu Beiyu. Apart from the people of Medicine City, no one else would be able to help them. Long Fei Yi should be very clear about this. He was on good terms with the Wang clan of Medicine City. It shouldn't be difficult for Duke Wang to come forward and find the Council of Elders. Han Yunxi didn't mention any of this to Jiyu Beiyu. She was only puzzled. What was this guy doing here instead of going to the Wang clan? Of course, no matter what he was here for, she'd be safe now that he was here. Han Yunxi didn't hide the pleasant surprise in her eyes as they shone brightly. "Greetings to your Highness Duke of Qin." Jiyu Beiyu bowed. Han Yunxi murmured, "Your Highness." Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. As soon as he approached, official Ouyang hurried forward to open the lock. Unexpectedly, not only did Long Fei Yi have no intention of entering, he even questioned him coldly, "Official Ouyang, who allowed you to open the lock of a criminal personally appointed by His Majesty?" Everyone was startled by these words. Even Han Yunxi was taken aback. She didn't understand what he meant. Jiyu Beiyu stood in the shadows, so his expression couldn't be seen. However, Long Fei Yi didn't allow him to rise. He maintained his salute from beginning to end. Official Ouyang was even more confused. He stepped back and said, Yes, Your Highness is right. This official has failed in his duty." Long Fei Yi didn't enter, but he couldn't just stand there. Official Ouyang hurriedly ordered someone to bring a chair for him to sit outside the cell. Tea, pastries, and incense were all served. Long Fei Yi lazily sat down. He wasn't in a hurry to speak. If he didn't speak, Han Yunxi, who didn't understand the situation, wouldn't speak. This made official Ouyang very anxious. He was at a loss. What did His Highness Duke of Qin mean by this attitude? Should he tactfully step aside and let His Highness and esteemed Wang Fei speak alone? Or should he continue to stand guard here and listen to what they had to say? "Official Ouyang, His Majesty has imprisoned the criminal in the justice courts. Are you in charge of this case?" Long Fei Yi finally spoke. "Yes." Official Ouyang didn't dare to reveal too much. He complained inwardly. How was His Highness Duke of Qin here to visit him? He was simply here to interrogate him. "When will the trial begin?" Long Fei Yi asked again. This official is also waiting for His Majesty's orders. Official Ouyang really didn't know. According to the law, can Qin Wang Fei be bailed out until the trial begins? Long Fei Yi asked again. So Long Fei Yi had come to bail her out. At least this guy still had a bit of humanity. Han Yunxi's heart finally relaxed. "Your Highness, according to the law, a criminal personally appointed by His Majesty cannot be bailed out, unless..." Before official Ouyang could finish speaking, Long Fei Yi raised his hand to indicate that he didn't need to explain. His attitude had taken a 180-degree turn. The Son of Heaven is guilty of the same crime as the common people. Official Ouyang is an impartial person worthy of praise. Official Ouyang was overwhelmed by the favor and didn't know how to reply. Han Yunxi hadn't expected this at all. She creased her brows and stared at Long Fei Yi. Just why had he come? Long Fei Yi's eyes were calm as he prepared to continue speaking. But it was then that an announcement came in. Qin Wang Rong has arrived. Qin Wang Rong. Who was Qin Wang Rong? Tianning's nobility was divided into 6 ranks: Wang, Duke, Marquis, Count, Viscount, and Baron. Wang was a direct descendant of the imperial clan. In terms of status, Qin Wang Rong and the Duke of Qin were both Qin Wang. But in terms of seniority, both the Duke of Qin and Emperor Tianhui had to call Qin Wang Rong imperial uncle. Qin Wang Rong was the late emperor's younger brother. Qin Wang Rong was the #1 official who'd helped the late emperor conquer the country. After the late emperor ascended the throne, he'd retired from the scene and rarely interfered with court affairs. Although he had no power in name, he had a high reputation within the imperial clan. When the late emperor was still alive, he was the one who had the most say by his side. During the struggle for the throne, various factions had tried their best to rope him in, but Qin Wang Rong had always remained neutral. He'd never favored any of the princes. Now that Tianning was under Emperor Tianhui's rule, this old Qin Wang who'd rejected him in the past still had the right to speak. Whether it was Emperor Tianhui or the Duke of Qin, they had to respectfully call him imperial uncle whenever they saw him. Who would have thought that Qin Wang Rong would show up at a time like this? Why had he come? Had Emperor Tianhui invited him here to intimidate His Highness Duke of Qin? But that didn't seem likely. After all, Qin Wang Rong hadn't shown his face during the struggle for the throne, but he still doted on His Highness Duke of Qin the most. Official Ouyang was about to go greet him when Qin Wang Rong arrived. His thick eyebrows reached his temples, and his eyes were bright and spirited. Although he was old and his hair had turned white, he still looked luxurious and majestic. His scholarly robes couldn't hide the stern and dignified air of a man who'd spent half his life on the military. Han Yunshi had long heard of this Qin Wang Rong's illustrious name. Besides Long Fei Yi, this old Qin Wang was the most respected of all the princes in Tianning. What kind of wind was blowing today to bring Tianning's most respected prince here? The justice courts were honored to shine with golden splendor. No one else knew why Qin Wang Rong had shown up, but Han Yunshi had an inkling. It looked like news of Mama Su had reached this old Qin Wang's ears. Long Fei Yi rose to his feet and even said respectfully, "Imperial uncle, long time no see." Han Yunshi followed the others in making deep bows. Greetings to Qin Wang Rong. May Qin Wang Rong live thousands and thousands of years. Qin Wang Rong didn't even consider Han Yunshi worthy of his attention. He didn't even spare her a glance as he sat down in Long Fei Yi's seat. "Fei, your lordship just heard about this and came to take a look. I'm not bothering you, am I?" Long Fei Yi didn't answer directly. Instead, he said cold, "Han Yunshi, why haven't you thanked Imperial Uncle for his concern?" Han Yunshi expressed her thanks, but Qin Wang Rong didn't accept it. Instead, he laughed coldly. "Your lordship came for the crown prince. I came specifically to see what kind of despicable woman dared to swindle her way into the palace and plot against the crown prince." Silence fell upon the crowd at his words. Han Yunshi clenched her fists and prepared to retort, but Long Fei Yi said, if she wasn't the daughter of the Empress Dowager's savior, would His Majesty have trusted her so easily? "It's a pity." Long Fei Yi didn't finish his sentence, but only gave a light, mocking laugh. Han Yunshi looked at him in disbelief. Belatedly, she realized that this guy hadn't come to bail her out at all, but to express his stance and draw a clear line between them. Because of Mama Su's matter, the great changes in the court, the crown prince's illness, and Qin Wang Rong's appearance, he was going to abandon the rook to save the king? How could he be this kind of person? Han Yunshi tightly clenched her teeth. Her anger towards Long Fei Yi overshadowed her dissatisfaction towards Qin Wang Rong. She didn't want to believe it. Because he already knew that he would throw her out one day, was that why he refused to tell her all his secrets? She really had been willing all along. For the first time, Han Yunshi discovered that she was pitifully stupid. Long Fei Yi's attitude also surprised Qin Wang Rong. However, Qin Wang Rong was a shrewd old man, not a calf that was easy to scare. Han Konggan has already misdiagnosed once, and now this kind of thing has happened. "In your lordship's opinion, the Han family must be exterminated as a warning to others," he said coldly. The Han family was what Han Yunxi cared about the most. He didn't expect that Long Fei Yi would actually agree. After the case is settled, severe punishment must be meted out. Your lordship came today specifically to inform official Ouyang that there's no need to have misgivings about this lordship's face. Everything must be done according to the law. As he spoke, he paused for a moment before continuing. Official Ouyang is a fair and just person. Your lordship was just praising him. Official Ouyang was already dumbfounded by His Highness the Duke of Qin's attitude. He thought that since Qin Wangrong had already made an appearance, the Duke of Qin would probably yield to His Majesty. It was just a woman, so what should be lost would still be lost. Your Highness is too kind. Impartiality is this official's duty. This official definitely won't disappoint Your Majesty. Chapter 225. Han Yunxi didn't hear what Long Fei Yi and Qin Wangrong said after that. Until they left, she stood still with her head lowered. Her mood was very low. To be exact, it was disappointment. When she moved out of the hibiscus courtyard and was rejected in the carriage, she wasn't this disappointed. But, this time, Long Fei Yi, it turns out that, you're nothing more than this. As soon as Long Fei Yi left, official Ouyang came back and couldn't wait to switch Han Yunxi and Jiyu Beiyu back to their original cells. Jiyu Beiyu wanted to say something to Han Yunxi, but unfortunately, he didn't even have the chance. This woman had always been a source of light. Even in the darkest world, she had the power to illuminate herself. But now, she was like a dim luminous pearl, lifeless. One of them was brought to the right, and the other to the left. Although Jiyu Beiyu was silent, he looked back again and again, his eyes flashing with concern and distress. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi was completely immersed in her own world and forgot about Jiyu Beiyu's existence. Long Fei Yi abandoned the rook to save the king, and Jiyu Beiyu was also in prison. At this time, who could find the higher-ups of the medical school to save them? Who would save the Han family? In fact, Han Yunxi had a trump card in her hand. Not only could she save herself, but she could also save many people. Unfortunately, she didn't think about Mother Sue's matter at all. Back in the smelly and dirty little black prison, Han Yunxi leaned against the cold wall. Her eyes were dark and her heart was cold. Official Ouyang looked at her disdainfully and didn't avoid it. He actually ordered in front of her, "Come, from now on, 3 meals a day according to the standards of a condemned prisoner." Official Ouyang was recommended by Official Shu of the Ministry of Appointments. When Han Yunxi bullied Madame Shu and the Han family's eldest young master, Official Ouyang was the one who was most troubled. Now that the situation was clear, how could Lord Ouyang not take revenge? Of course, because of Han Yunxi's identity, Official Ouyang didn't dare to torture her, but he could still torture her for a few days. Official Ouyang originally thought that Han Yunxi would be angry, but who knew that Han Yunxi was like a dead person, standing there without any reaction. Official Ouyang didn't feel any sense of accomplishment at all and was very dissatisfied. Just as he was about to walk over and humiliate him, the jailer hastily stopped him and whispered, "My lord, this subordinate feels that the question His Highness Duke of Qin asked before he left is very strain." Long Fei Yi left after seeing Prince Rong off. Before leaving, he asked Official Ouyang one last question in a low voice. According to the law, can they live in the high-class prison? According to the law, Jiyu Beiyu's status didn't allow him to live there, but Han Yunxi's status definitely did. That's what Official Ouyang had said. Actually, according to the law was a neutral term. Everything had to be done according to the law and handled according to the law. One couldn't ask for special privileges, nor could one use private punishment to avenge personal grudges. But people tended to overlook the latter. Official Ouyang wasn't an idiot, but he didn't think too much of it after seeing the Duke of Qin agree with Prince Rong. He only assumed that the Duke of Qin had asked casually before he left. What's strange about it? She's already an abandoned chess piece. As this official sees it, His Majesty won't interrogate her, but just wait to convict her. Official Ouyang had no idea that his words had revealed the truth behind today's visit. Unfortunately, It was already too late by the time he realized the truth. As soon as Prince Rong left, he went straight to the palace. Emperor Tianhui had long set up a chessboard and been waiting for a long time. After Prince Rong went into seclusion, he'd become obsessed with chess. In the world, only he and Long Fei Yi dared to break Emperor Tianhui's chessboard, while Long Fei Yi was the only one capable of doing so. When it came to chess, Qin Wangrong preferred Long Fei Yi. But today he was exceptionally patient. He sat down and played a few moves before speaking. It looks like there's no need to interrogate this woman. Naturally, Emperor Tianhui was already aware of the situation at the justice courts. He'd schemed against Han Yunxi to give Long Fei Yi a hard time and threaten Han Yunxi to reveal the truth about Mama Su. Now Long Fei Yi's attitude of abandoning the rook to save the king made it clear that the woman knew nothing about Mama Su. Otherwise, Long Fei Yi's strict personality wouldn't have thrown her away so easily. Han Yunxi wasn't an ordinary woman, so he had to be on guard against the possibility that Han Yunxi would expose Mama Su and bite him in the back. It's a good thing that Zhen prepared 18 tortures for her, Emperor Tianhui said coldly. If not for Long Fei Yi's trip today, Han Yunxi would have suffered a lot in the justice courts in the coming days. Prince Rong disdained Emperor Tianhui's cruelty to women. He gave a cold snort and said, instead of going to war against a little girl, it's better to spend more time on the Duke of Qin's origins. Our Tianning's imperial bloodline can't be sullied. Seeing Qin Wangrong's disdainful expression, Emperor Tianhui felt uncomfortable despite his deference to the man. He was the ruler of a nation who couldn't be looked down upon. Yes, imperial uncle's teachings are right. He didn't plan to continue the topic. Of course, he didn't plan to torture Han Yunxi either, lest Prince Rong look down on him again. In the end, dealing with women wasn't something a man should do, much less the demeanor of a nation's ruler. Although it was surprising, Prince Rong's appearance made the Duke of Qin's compromise reasonable. Han Yunxi's trial was the Duke of Qin's first step to compromise. Emperor Tianhui believed that the first step would lead to a second, then a third. Once the Duke of Qin's henchmen were taken care of, he refused to believe that the Duke of Qin had 3 heads and 6 arms to break free of his inescapable net. Long Fei Yi had just returned to the solitary enclosure when Tang Li rushed to meet him. Long Fei Yi, have you gone mad? He demanded. Long Fei Yi arched a brow at him, but didn't answer. Instead, he asked Chu Shifeng, have there been any movements from Medical City? Chu Shifeng didn't even get a chance to reply before Tang Li grabbed Long Fei Yi by the collar. You forced Han Yunxi into a corner. What if she reveals the truth? And don't forget that the perplexing butterfly illusion is in her hands too. Long Fei Yi shoved Tang Li's hand, but the latter refused to let go. Long Fei Yi shoved again without using any strength, but Tang Li was sent flying until he crashed against the door. He elegantly straightened out his collar and asked, isn't this the best chance to test her? That's too high of a price. Tang Li wasn't convinced. Your lordship can afford to lose. Long Fei Yi was nonchalant. You. Tang Li was infuriated, but had no words to retort. He simply sat on one side, too lazy to speak. Chu Shifeng was stunned as well, but if he had to seriously answer whether he believed Han Yunxi or not, he'd still believe her. That woman was different from other women, perhaps even better than men. She had her own principles and strength of character, as well as the confidence to do certain things. Of course, Chu Shifeng didn't dare to say too much. He only reported, Your Highness, there's no news from Medical City for now, but the palace has found out that director she needs 10 days to cure the crown prince. That means, esteemed Wang Fei and the rest still have 10 days. A complicated look flickered past Long Fei Yi's eyes before he muttered, continue to keep an eye on Medical City. Today's high-profile visit wasn't just a show for Emperor Tianhui, but Jiyu Beiyu as well. He was very curious as to why this genius divine doctor, who could have been like a fish in water in Medical City, had condescended to stay in Tianning's imperial physician courtyard for so many years. 3 days later, there was still no news from Medical City. Han Yunxi and Jiyu Beiyu were locked up in 2 separate cells with no chance to interact with each other. Their treatment as prisoners on death row made things difficult for them. Jiyu Beiyu didn't touch any of the spoiled food sent to them, but only drank water to maintain himself. It wasn't until the fourth day that an unfamiliar jailer used the excuse of delivering water to approach the bars. Jiyu Beiyu calmly walked over. "How is it?" Jiyu Beiyu asked in a low voice. "Someone beat us to it. Luo Zuishan's already asked for instructions from the Council of Elders. He'll reach Tianing's capital tonight," the jailer replied. "Long Fei Yi?" Jiyu Beiyu asked doubtfully. He had a way to get in touch with Medical City on the day of his capture, so he had his reasons for not moving immediately. "It's not the Duke of Qin. There's been no movement from him at all." "It's Jiyu," the jailer replied. Jiyu Beiyu's eyes lit up as he seemed to understand something. He smiled faintly. He's smart enough to know to find Luo Zuishan. Who was Luo Zuishan? Besides the late grandfather Jiyu, there were only two other sixth-ranked primogenitor doctors in the medical academy. One was Director Shi, and the other was Director Luo Zuishan. It wasn't easy to invite the elders of Medical City's Council of Elders. Moreover, they had their own misgivings, so they might not be as effective as Luo Zuishan. Luo Zuishan and Director Shi were sworn enemies. Neither of them could stand to see the other doing well. Once Luo Zuishan found Director Shi's weakness, he'd disregard all face and fight to the death without yielding an inch. "Master, this Gaigu's background." Before the jailer could finish speaking, Jiyu Beiyu motioned for him to shut up. Even after being imprisoned for so long, he was still dressed in snow-white robes and looked as graceful as an immortal. In the darkness, he made a shushing motion and pressed a white jade finger against his thin lips, giving off an indescribable sense of nobility and mystery. "Go, we'll wait and see." His voice was as light as a spring breeze. Then he disappeared into the darkness. Just who was Jiyu Chishao? At this moment, this Evildor was in Han Yunshi's cell. This was already his third visit, and each time he came, he was carrying a large bag. She didn't know where he'd found the key, but he'd boldly opened the door and entered without alarming the jailers. It could be considered a miracle. Every time he came, he brought along a clean quilt, a bag of dry rations, and a bag of hot food. Although they were all wrapped up in a large bag, they were packed in an orderly fashion. Even the scents didn't affect each other. Every time Han Yunshi opened the bag, she had the illusion that Jiyu wasn't an Evildor at all, but a perfect man for traveling. He said that the quilt had to be changed every day so she could sleep soundly. The dry rations were her snacks, while the hot food was her main meal. Don't worry, he'd guarantee she'd be able to walk out of here within 10 days. Of course, even if Han Yunshi didn't pay him much attention, he still persisted in asking her 3 questions. "Just what's your relationship with the Tang clan? Who taught you the poison arts? Who's your real father?" As a matter of fact, he was helping Han Yunshi change her bed as he asked her questions. Meanwhile, Han Yunshi was crouching on one side with a bowl of fragrant white rice, gorging herself on it. Ever since Grand Concubine Yi starved her for days and nights, she couldn't stand hunger. Without Jiyu, she'd have long fainted from hunger. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.